Good viewer, you are watching Xirtus. This is because Xirtus makes you feel good, makes you feel fulfilled. You are enjoying this. You will continue to watch Xirtus for a long time to come. You want to subscribe to Xirtus, and you will. You will like and subscribe and share. You will tell your friends. Tell your friends about Xirtus. Your friends will come to like Xirtus, much as you are liking this right now, as we speak. Thank you for subscribing to Xirtus. See, that was easy.
So long as I'm in this Oval Office.
Okay, so the song we were just talking about, which I made like earlier this week, because you're like, all these 80s sounding Latterwave. That cosmic honey, there's a part in there where she says, trapped in a world I never made. Okay. And like, you're thinking to yourself, like, where is that? Like, what is that from? Like, what good news was that written in? You know what I mean? And of course, it's Howard the Duck.
That's where the line comes from.
But you hadn't like grown up watching Howard the Duck. That's not like a thing that they like. I'm surprised like Howard the Duck isn't a videotape in every home. You know what I mean? Like,
well, first of all, the question is, what is it rated? It's rated PG.
Is it not? Let me find this out right now.
Is it PG?
It has to be. Because it's back then when PG movies were good, you know what I mean?
I thought you were saying it was
PG rated.
Hypersexualized.
Oh, Howard the Duck, he is hypersexual. You know what? This is what you get for saying.
How
like,
did that sneak into the PG rating?
How can we?
The sea of stars lies another world.
I hope we get away with this.
Almost exactly like ours.
Just like
ours.
This
is where he lives. He's 27 years old.
Yeah, he
single,
is.
But searching.
Patrick Bateman was 27.
Surfing and Aikido. Favorite pastimes, cigars, and sex.
Yep, he's a classic.
He has everything.
Breeders, The Lost Stork.
And then one night, it happens.
Hey, good buddy, are you home?
He has a very sudden midlife crisis. He lands in Cleveland.
Cleveland, my God.
I know why you were sent to me.
Listen to me, small visitor. I can
return
explain
some
how you got
videotapes.
here.
Maybe you're here for some.
Dude, and that guy turned out to be. And that guy, okay, hold on, just really quickly, because she's, God, whatever happened to her? I'm just kidding. She's beautiful. But where?
You know why you were sent to me.
Listen to.
Okay, so first off, this guy got caught as like having a bunch of child pornography on his computer, right? That was like a thing, and it like destroyed his career. And he was in Beetlejuice.
I can explain how you got here.
Maybe you're here for some greater purpose, some
Oh, but like, look at that hair. Tell me the 80s hair isn't like your favorite hair. It's just,
Cosmic Cause.
Here,
I gotta say, I'm
most
kind of a fan.
yeah, this is pretty
reassess
good.
his career goals.
You went to med school?
So wait, but that's not Heather Hunt. That's the girl from Back to the
To
Future.
explore new relationships. To
Look what's going
redefine
on
his
here.
self-image.
I'm sorry, we don't allow pets on the premises.
To
Pez.
adjust to a changing lifestyle.
Oh yeah, and he does
Oh,
her.
boy.
Yeah.
Until he discovers just who he really is.
Oh, no.
A duck in big trouble.
Yeah, he's in trouble. Oh man, the silhouette.
This is
Howard
all
the Duck.
PG. It's so
This is-
crazy.
This you gotta just sit there because you want. This is the kind of movie you want your parents there. You want to be there with your kids. You want to be able to explain to them, like when a woman and a duck, like from across the galaxy, like it does, because
Seriously.
love is complicated. You know what I
Love is
mean?
love.
Love
This
is con-
this duck can consent.
This is one of those things where like your kids are explaining to mom and dad what's going on, and I like that. I like that in a movie.
World he never made.
Here it is. Here it is. You're a duck,
Howard
man.
the Duck. Trapped in a world he never made.
Trapped in a world he never made. Howard the Duck.
So,
Coming
like,
from George
what
Lucas.
significance are you
George
extracting from that?
I don't know, dude. Trapped in a world he never made. That's how I feel. That is like I feel that way more than I feel like Jesus. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I'm trapped in a world I never made. That's so
I mean-
Gnostic, right?
I mean, like, shouldn't that be like the default assumption, though? Like, why would you say, "Oh, I'm in a world that I made"? That seems like a strange default expectation.
I don't know. A lot of people feel that way. I think Descartes kind of felt that way. He's like, maybe everything is something I made up. I don't know. Like that's a complete
So, okay,
plausibility.
so you're talking about like an idealist perspective on reality, like metaphysical idealism.
Right. Like who's to say everything out there is further away? Maybe it's inwards and more dense. Everything you believe could just be empirical distortion, empirical perversion, right?
So do you find the metaphysical idealist perspective like intuitive from like a default expectation type of a stance?
I don't think
Or
I don't think
should
it's
I-
fair to
should I-
say there's a general metaphysics, but yes, maybe. Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe I should just clarify to make sure we're talking the same language here. So the way I think of metaphysical idealism is basically the entire world, all of reality, it's composed of ideas, right? Idealism, it reduces to the concept of ideas. So basically when we're looking at ontology, we're trying to figure out what are these different substances, what exists. And the idealist position says that everything reduces to building blocks that are of an idea substance, right? So
Right.
this is, everything is ideas. And then like some idealists, they kind of go, like you were saying, in the direction of like, I'm dreaming up reality. So when you dream, you're creating a world of ideas, and they extend that phenomenology to the external reality, to where external reality is just a made up system of ideas, just like a dream.
Right. Yeah, I don't completely think that. So what I think is that, and let's start with some of the paradoxes to that logic. If there are metaphysical ideals, where are they in material form? We find these amazing ideals. Like I agree that, like we've talked about this before, straight lines are incredible ideas. Where do you find a straight ruler, right? Nothing ever actually is in the material form one of these divine principles. But so earlier the other day we were talking about space-time and the idea that space-time is essentially a dead concept because it's, ideal driven. But I can't think of anything better than ideals to replace space-time with, because really you have to think of it as arrangements of symmetry, and there are intersections of symmetry where there are different ways to arrive at the same symmetry. So if everything is stacked the same way, then it would make the most sense from random access memory to just constantly use the same like if anything is the same way, then you just do the same thing. So there would be different moments that could cross, that would go through because there's different ways to arrive at the same equivalency. There's different formulas that would reach the same answers, right? It's not all just one way to get there. There's certain things that you could arrive at, kind of the way the 100th monkey, like after someone comes up with a fishing net, then a bunch of people on the other side of the world will come up with that fishing net. Like these ideas start to emerge. So I think that ideas are important and they do emerge, but it might be more of a discovery of divine principles and constantly trying to shape yourself, to transform yourself, to conform to divine principles.
Yeah. So I guess I'm struggling to piece together like metaphysical idealism with this idea. Like it sounds to me you're kind of like talking about like a convergent evolution where two different groups are evolving on or inventing the same concepts, right? What's the relationship between that and metaphysical idealism?
I think metaphysical idealism is again like the Aristotelian values. So we have these goals of perfection, but nothing can ever be perfect, and very few things can remain. I mean, nothing can really last. Everything's plastic, so nothing can be durably perfect or even durably good enough, like forever. It can only be for a range of time close to an ideal, right? And even then, it's possible ideals, even if the ideal is objective, it's possible that the material reflection of the ideal, the material consequence of that ideal changes. So it might be that we experience the value of a sphere, but that because of physics, the shape literally changes to what the consequences of having a sphere come from. So we could create completely different universes that have completely different ground rules. I mean, there's different ways things can be arranged in symmetry. There's no reason why we have to be carbon based, right? Carbon just seems to be really practical from every plausible, like you've talked about it from like a randomness chance. Like carbon's the best. If you were randomly throwing things together, carbon's the most practical thing to just get it to work. But if you were designing something, like you could make something out of silicon and nitrogen, you have nitrogen based life, right? And it would probably be more durable, right? If we were trying to do that.
But that seems like a materialist perspective that you're building up. Like from an idealist standpoint, you don't need materials, you don't need carbon. Like a dream, like if you're dreaming up like some coal or something, if you zoom in on the coal in your dream, it doesn't have to be like, a carbon atom that like can go 4 different ways and it's perfectly structured to be like the most the Lego block with the highest utility. Like in a dream world, the fundamental materials don't matter because you're just inventing this facade, right?
I think that because then you get macroscopic. You get macroscopic, microscopic, and the idea of nanostructures emerges is more and more important because you find that there are sacred geometric principles that guide the smallest structures. And then even beyond that, if you're looking at like subatomic particles, then you get into the point that everything, sure, on a metaphysical level, everything is just weights. And so if you think about it, that's literally how AI works. We drive things by weights of importance, right? Yeah. Like this is what happened with the African-American German soldiers, right? Was that they excelled the weight of certain importance. So you can control weights and it will have like direct effects, but you can also allow it to make its decision of what weight, what is the appropriate weight of something. And that's all through empathy. It's all through reaction. It's all through awareness of one thing, of the other things being affected and what's going on with it.
Well, our brains operate on weights too, just like AI, right? Like the whole AI field is largely inspired by neuroscience. It's totally fascinating. Like I was reading a study the other day, and hopefully I can recall the details properly, but it's something to the effect of you've got neurons and the neurons connect to each other. So like there's like a synaptic output, right? So I'm trying to figure out, the neuron is over here. The neuron shoots an electric signal down the axon and it outputs the signal through the synapse. That synapse connects to the other neuron that receives the signal. And the dendrite quantity helps influence the synapse. So like there's these tentacles, synapse tentacles and dendrite tentacles, they interface and they can vary in quantity. And I think basically the more quantity of tentacles on these neurons, that's the weight, right? So they're getting a bigger signal because all of these, each tentacle is outputting more power. And so you can have, each neuron can individually weight its strength based on the number of tentacles.
Wow. Yeah. So examples like this are why I'm not against material. And I think that some metaphysicists, I mean, there are people that use the word meta, and I think that like the word physics has been further and further divorced from the concept, but it shouldn't be that way. Really, the idea of metaphysics should be a telescopic perspective on physics. It's just how everything works at the microscopic and the macroscopic level. It should be both ends of the equation, both as far in and as far out. So, I mean, like, we've noticed that there are repeating loops in material form. So there are clearly ideals, but those ideals are never met. So it's not true to say that reality is, one or the other, right? Because they're clearly married together.
Okay, so like it seems like you're very interested in these. I think you're calling them ideals, right? And the way I'm interpreting you is these ideals are like mathematically perfect patterns. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's very, and I'm being reductionist, not just you, but like I'm sure that that's a good beginning to what I'm thinking. Like these are the divine principles, and I think what do you say, structures or shapes, geometry, sacred geometry.
So, like a circle, like a perfect circle is theoretically impossible in nature. Perfect line is theoretically impossible, but like it seems like you seem to be communicating that the universe is kind of inspired by these perfect patterns.
Yeah.
But to me, that does not that's not in conflict with materialism. To me, like you can have a material universe that like kind of gravitates to these perfect patterns. Like the existence of this perfect mathematical ideal does not lead me to the conclusion that everything is an arbitrary dream. You know what I mean?
Right. I agree with that. I think the arbitrary dream part is more of a concern usually than a escapism. So you could, who is it? Schopenhauer and I'm trying to think of like there's a great example of like a cynic nihilist philosopher from France that talks about this idea that you can't really trust your senses, and therefore that's great because you might as well, just be happy to live your life, and who cares because everything is so absurd that it's happening anyway that you can just go on living. And I think that's, that is fair to an extent. That is why the 90s happened. It was like a fantastic generation, but there's also kind of this conflict with if there are divine principles tied to the material, and the benefit of following those divine principles is better density, lack of entropy. And we see this even on like a geologic scale, right? Like when carbon is arranged in perfect structure, it becomes it's a diamond, and it's, indestructible. I mean, these are essentially values that we can find attributes that we can connect to. So there's nothing wrong with that. But when you believe in your empiricism to a fault, right? That's when you have to be careful. I think we still have to be careful about how quickly we can be. I mean, the other beautiful thing of the 20th century is the psychedelic movement, because it taught people they can't trust their senses. I mean, you had all of these professors and scientists who were taking psychedelics, and they could lack depth perception, had new concepts of space-time and reality, distortions of their empirical perceptions. And one of the lessons there is you cannot just trust in your own perceptions. I mean, that's one of the reasons why originally religion was not, just a joke. A religion started out with, let's have a shared perspective, a shared perception. You have your lens, I have my lens. We cannot individually see the entire everythingness, right? And I think that's the beginning. That's it's something tied to the Socratic method.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I just recently wrote a blog article where I title it Credentist Epistemology, where I kind of lay forth kind of my epistemological philosophic paradigm. And so like the beginning of my blog, I kind of like, I try to build up the skeptical case, right? The whole, we got to be skeptical of our senses, etc. And after I basically, I do the same thing that like Descartes was doing, like destroy everything that you think you know is reliable. And then I try to build back up an epistemology from the ground up, but I don't rely on God or anything like that. I rely on credence, right? A precept of credence where multiple pieces of evidence, they present probabilities. And when you aggregate all of these probabilities, they start to multiply together in an exponential fashion. And so the more you aggregate your data, you've got your vision data, you've got your smell data, you've got your touch data, you've got, third person data, you've got experimental data, the more data you aggregate, all of those probabilities build a epistemological foundation that is exponentially close to 100%, right? The more you add, the closer it gets to 100%. And my paradigm is that's good enough. We don't need 100%. We just need exponentially close to 100%.
I mean, maybe, because I think the other problem is that you can be easily deceived by that. If you really wanted to, then you can build up a system that gets the responses you want from you can trigger any response you want.
Yeah.
Like there's always
I totally agree. Okay, I grew up Mormon, right? And like technically I was unconsciously applying a credentist epistemology as, I don't know, a 12-year-old Mormon. Like I had all these like spiritual experiences. It's like I pray for something, like where did the toy go? I pray for it and I find it like immediately afterwards. I'm like, ooh, that's a piece of data of like the power of prayer. And like as I aggregate all these experiences, my belief in like, the power of prayer like skyrocketed towards 100%. But the longer I've lived my life, the more I've seen how there's like bias. There's a religious bias in the aggregation of data, right? When a prayer fails, the religious person has a bias to forget and ignore that piece of data, right? If you bring in all the failed prayers, it drops that credentist epistemology way down. You know what I mean?
Dude, I feel like you're like Howard the Duck. You know what I mean? Like you come from another universe, and you got your own little reality.
Yeah, probably.
Not completely. I don't know if you've got like his like some of it. He's got some weird hobbies, but you know what I mean? Just the idea of coming from a different universe, a different epistemology, and there's different expectations. And so that's a good example of how you can easily grow up thinking these are why these things are happening. Look, of course this happens because this, and you can train someone because like if this happens, you tell them like, hey, have you ever had it rain before? It's probably because you're masturbating. I don't know if that's a thing. I've heard that people used to be told that. You know what I mean?
That's the Egyptian religion. They believe that the rain is the semen of the gods.
There's definitely a tie there. The other one was you'll go blind, but that could happen if you get syphilis. So it's probably like a gateway to, like that lifestyle or something. I'm sure that there's like a reason for the wives' tales.
Oh, there's a super cool example of this, like the evolutionary utility of myth, right? It's kind of like okay, so let me see. This is the context. There is, like ancient Israelites, they would do burnt offerings of animals, right? And like from an evolutionary perspective, like this is the stupidest like ritual. Like this is your food. You're making your food like go extinct and you're wasting it. You're not like getting utility out of it. Why would the Israelites burn up all their food, right? But then I was reading about the Hindu or like ancient India, like the Hindu religion. They were doing the same thing. They were doing burnt offerings of animals. And like, when there's a costly, like evolutionary logic, whenever there's a costly behavior that seems somewhat universal,
someone's got to pay for it.
That's a sign that there's a hidden benefit, right? Because like maybe there'll be like random costly cultures, but if multiple cultures are doing something illogical, there's got to be a hidden benefit there. So I started investigating. I think I figured it out. So what happens is animals, when you burn them, they release soot into the atmosphere. And guess what happens when you release soot into the atmosphere? It irritates the clouds and it triggers rain. And so that's exactly what the Israelites were doing. They're praying for rain. They burn an animal. Up goes the soot. Down comes the rain. And they're like, God answered our prayers. And of course, it wasn't God. It was science.
Well, it's a little bit of both, I guess, because you've got if your intention in it's working, and part of it is that you think that all of nature. I mean, that might be the thing that is the ideals and divine principles, like the thing behind the wall there. You don't think that there's maybe a connection between the fact that that works, that you can do that. That plus also killing your animals. I mean, let's say you've got animals. I guess they don't really do the sickly animals. Is that right? But it seems like you could get rid of disease because you have like a cleaner stock because you're able to like constantly make sure that you're culling anything.
That's an excellent like counter argument. That does seem evolutionarily illogical. If you're gonna burn something, burn the sickly ones, not the best ones.
Well, it depends because it might be at a certain point you're like, well, it didn't work for you. Well, yeah, because you didn't use your best stuff, and eventually that becomes, humans are like that.
It becomes a test of like sincerity. Like there's a religious phenomenon where the religions that demand more sacrifice from the members, they actually like survive and thrive better than low demand religions. And so maybe by ratcheting up the sacrifice, they made it more like mentally salient. People never forgot. It was like, this was really hard for me to do, but then I got the rain, and it perpetuated better for some reason.
I'm really interested in that. I like the idea, when you look at today's understandings of things, a lot of our understanding, like the idiot box, or I don't know. I'm trying to think of examples, but like demons, even in computers. Like if you ask like a Unix programmer, he's going to call most of the programs daemons, right? So I don't know if you know that, but just for anybody who doesn't.
Socrates had a daemon.
Yeah, but also like it was diamond, in Socrates, but also daemon in computing right there. You call your systems, your daemons, right? Like your bus daemons, like pretty important. Anyway, these ideas come from like old, not just from Christianity, but a lot of time from like Norse and pagan concepts, like the Draugr, this kind of idea of this thing that becomes immortal, an undead creature that becomes immortal and has sort of like a corporeal body. These ideas of something that like you can basically build something that outlives itself. So the thing makes a shell for itself because it's like a seashell, essentially. Yeah. But instead that thing's alive, right? So that's a big. We've created this world. Hey, look, Latter-day Chad. Sacrifice creates some sort of karmic energy. Yeah, I agree with that.
Karma.
What do you think about causation? Because like karma sounds like woo and religious, but it's causation, right? Like literally, if I do this, this will happen, right?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like I'm pretty materialistic about like my interpretation of karma. It's like I don't believe that you're guaranteed to have this karmic relationship with the universe, but often there are natural karmic processes, right? Like a perfect.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. A perfect evolutionary example is tit for tat morality, right? In computer simulations, the evolutionary researchers, they discovered that like tit for tat is a successful strategy to like balance out, populations of creatures, and tit for tat is social karma, right? So tit for tat, it's like a retribution. It's like, if you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. If you're good to me, I'm going to be good to you, right? And so as an evolutionary strategy, that it punishes the bad creatures and it rewards the good creatures, and it keeps everyone kind of balanced in harmony. And so that's it's a mathematical thing, like the math of evolution likes social karma, for example.
All right. Well, really quickly, I gotta do this. Hold on a
As
second.
sisters in Zion, we'll all work together. The blessings of God on our labor.
This is one of my favorite tunes.
We'll build up His kingdom with earnest endeavor. We'll comfort the weary and strengthen the weak. The errand of angels is given to women, and this is a gift that as sisters we claim. To do whatsoever is gentle and human.
Even Seth's like, I don't know. I kind of feel it. I kind of feel it. Bum bum bum. As sisters in Zion. What's up, Draco? How you doing? He's muted still. I don't know what happened there. Oh, he's a pantomime.
Sorry about that. No, I'm an idiot.
You were worried that you're gonna be like falsetto singing along. I know, I do it too. It's all right. I was like, yeah. I feel you.
I tend to do that. I was born and raised in two cults, Mormonism and musical theater.
Oh, there you go. Dude, that's the thing people don't understand about the tabernacle. Like, there's a choir. It's a lot of fun. Like, there's a lot going on in the tabernacle.
A whole lot.
Did you ever sing in the choir?
No. I had several friends in it though. I could have.
Did you do the missionary choir?
No.
No.
Wasn't our time. There was some other group more privileged than us at the time to have the opportunity. Yeah.
Have you read the Emerald Tablets of Thoth?
I might need to like see a cover. I
really not. I figured you'd be like an Aleister Crowley, you know.
Oh, Crowley. No, I haven't read much Crowley. Actually, I don't think I've read any Crowley. Just all things about him from other people.
Probably for the best. I mean, so like real quick, Aleister Crowley was a dude who was raised in a hyper-religious cult in England, and they told him like you can't eat good food, and like you ought to like, you know, restrict your body, and like, you know, that'll be good because God's like karma. But their idea, like your good intention is going to lead to these good outcomes. He nearly died of like starvation and malnutrition and all these things, and they knew he was about to die, so they sent him to live with his uncle, who like got him drinking and got him prostitutes, and like he's about to die. So they're like, all right, well, let's like get this kid, you know, 16. He got better.
Drink, be merry. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Drinking the beer, eating the food, living the life, and it changed his mind about religion because he thought, well, wait a second, like if fasting is killing me and eating well is saving my life, what if everything is the opposite that I was taught? And he went on this crazy lifestyle change where he became, you know, like, well, you know what, I want to be the person you think of as if evil's the opposite of good, then I want to be that because good seems to be killing me.
Yeah.
And every step along the way, and to the point that he became, you know, he called himself the Antichrist. He did animals and kids, and like he was arrested in Italy, like the worst possible things. An example of the exact opposite of every lesson you've ever been taught according to religion or the state, but also evolution, right? Like, because these things don't last in nature. These kinds of people don't get to reproduce. And it's interesting because it created a meme though, right? And in a Dawkins sense, like there's enough people that are still influenced by Aleister Crowley that it's in a sense, he created a cult. But it also, it memed like beyond him, people still read his books and like he's reproducing, right? What do you think about that to start with?
Me? I mean, I guess the first thing that comes to mind, I mean, we kind of talked about it the last time I was on, like the DNA and intergenerational stuff, like that even applies to the ideas. And it was, I think, Terence McKenna who said, who ridiculed Dawkins and Pinker for things like the selfish gene and stuff, and I agree with him, hilarious. Anyway, but he said like memes are the genes of ideas, so that's just the DNA of ideas. So of course, yeah, if he put that DNA imprint out there in mimetics as that sort of like idea mind gene, then for sure he still lives among us.
It's weird. And what about Seth? What do you think also specifically about going against the training? He was taught that this was what you're supposed to do in his church, and then he was going to die from that. What do you think about his inversion?
Yeah. So I, from my evolutionary perspective, would be something like, as a creature, you want to live in a society that is good for your genes, right? The goal, like, you are technically a vehicle for your genes, right? The genes actually care about themselves more than they care about you. And so when you have children and you create a safe society, you are basically protecting the future of your genes. And I think that maybe like people can go through these experiences where they feel like society has betrayed them, right? So it's like, this society is not good for my genes. And maybe Aleister Crowley, he went through the same thing. This society is telling me that fasting is good, but it's not, it's killing me. And so he came to the conclusion, I need to create the opposite society. That's going to be more successful for my genes. He lost faith in the current and tried to flip it as a hypothesis, right?
Do you think that it was always okay? So do you think that it was always wrong? Do you think that the Tao of the situation was lost? Do you know about the Tao much, right? This idea of there's a flow of things and there's a material form of things, but the river flows, and if you build, the environment changes, the river will build a new path because a river has to do what a river has to do regardless. Do you think that he just found was trying to revitalize nature, or what do you think about this alternative path that he was picking that seems like the diametrically opposed to everything?
Right. So I would think that like the Tao would be kind of the conclusion of the dialectic, right? The dialectic is when there's contradicting forces, and then one of them is going to win, and like the Tao is like the flow that succeeds, right? And so Crowley, like the flow of society was like this Christian structure, and Crowley tried to flip that Christian structure upside down and contradict it, but he probably lost. So like the Tao, like the tide of evolution overpowered Crowley because his ideas didn't take over. And like maybe there's like a subcurrent, right? Maybe there's like two rivers of ideas, but like the main river is the dominant culture, right?
Am I delusional? I don't know about that. So like I kind of see it the other way around. For instance, when I hear the term New Age, and I don't mean to like lambast the term New Age because there's a lot of other things that are going under the term New Age now, but realistically, the term New Age was invented by Aleister Crowley, right? It's not that everything today is that New Age is Aleister Crowley, but he came up with the idea. He said, this is the new freaking age, like that was his idea. And I mean, the whole influence on satanic rock and roll, which is kind of a joke in this meme apparently, but I didn't even think about it. I was going to bring it up because of New Age into New Wave music. There was a lot of satanic influence in the British, the British occult, and the elite kids who were trained musicians, beaten to play piano as children for Led Zeppelin, to become. Eventually, these guys were occultists. They were royal occultists, and they still are. They're members of like the Royal Magic Club and things like that. So they think of magic very differently. I think it's kind of funny that Harry Potter is popular because this idea that technology and magic are different. Really, like magic's a craft, right? Like you have to do it in the temple with the underpants, with the right oil. It's essentially a D&D thing. Like, it's not as simple. There's order of operations. Like I think people, it's kind of like, it's funny when people talk about magic and it's the same thing when they say like with AI, like they think it's just so simple. You know what I mean? Like all of this stuff takes a lot of ritual, right? What do you think?
Yeah. So, I don't know. Like, I guess I don't know enough about Aleister Crowley to like know how successful his ideas were in society. Like I haven't seen.
Just how big do you think New Age is? Because it's New Age itself. I think I understand like the idea of moving away from good and evil towards like the rainbow, like not in a bad way, like trying to make like Aleister Crowley said you can call him sunshine. Like sunshine. He considered like he considered himself like the messenger of Eris, but also of Sophia. So it's like the goddess energy is a big thing with Crowley. And I think Draco, you were trying to say something.
No, not really. I was listening. I wasn't quite sure where it was going. I was just mostly agreeing with you that, I mean, rituals needed in a lot of places for a lot of people, even just down to like marriage. That's like a lot of our cultural debates, and that's just a type of ritual. You keep going, really. I was gonna build off where you were going.
Andreas, I think there's one easy way to do this is with like Pew Research polls, right? I think it's really funny. Like there's like a common misconception on within the right wing of politics. They think that the left wing is all atheistic or you know, God, they promote abortion, therefore they hate God. You know, there's a certain bias over there. But if you do the Pew Research, the left is hugely Christian, right? So like I think there was a recent poll, like religion, like Christianity is declining, but I think it went from like 80% to 70%, but it's still the dominant, you know, culture, I think.
Right. Well, I think, you know, it depends on your like level of conspiracy, but if you start to look into the Vatican, for instance, and you have the, you know, the World Bank, but you also have the archdiocese, which basically have a lot more control over the parts of the world that, like, the Archdiocese of New York has incredible amounts of control over New York, right? The Archdiocese in San Francisco, I think, has incredible control over California and in the West Coast in general. And we don't think about the connections really between like church and state, but particularly the Catholics, because of liberation theology and their effort for a socialist, you know, they created the socialist liberation theology movement in South America, which has been all over Europe for the last 50, 60 years, right? And so, yes, I mean, Catholicism has really taken the approach that Jesus was a communist, which is a cool punk rock song, if you haven't heard that one. But also, I mean, it's important that we look at helping people. And I think, you know, you can see how any church, American churches really kind of invented this idea after the Catholic Church had taken over hospitals. American churches took over the social benefactor role. And you see that with the Jehovah's Witness or the RLDS or, you know, the LDS or anybody, you know, they're saying we're going to go out into the community and help people, even in Hell's Kitchen with the Irish, right? That was the Baptists, like and if you go to the South, I mean, the only thing that held the South together after the War of Northern Aggression seems to be the Baptist Church and Freemasonry, because they were able to hold the communities together. But it also seems like it creates segregated nation states. That was also something I was noticing, because there's genetic pools that emerge because of that as well, which I think plays into what Draco was talking about, like gene-ridden anxiety, because then you really are perpetuating the same things generationally. Like you really, if you were going to try to cement epigenetics, I think that's that plus a few plays, you know, is probably all you need.
5-act plays.
Yeah,
we've got to discuss Peter Singer's expanding circle in conjunction with that point. Do you want to
explain? Please explain.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Peter Singer, a philosopher, modern philosopher, he wrote a book called The Expanding Circle. And the expanding circle, the concept is it's kind of your scope of moral consideration, or another way to put it is like your circle of love. And so like the hypothesis is something like creatures, like simple creatures, evolved to complex creatures, and their perspective about what they love used to be small, and then it's grown in a complex way. So the simplest type of love is loving yourself. And so like some animals, it's like all about the self. They don't, you know, they're going to eat other animals. They don't care. They'll eat their children. They don't care. You know, some insects have a very narrow conception of, you know, love. But then as you get more complex, you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to love my children. And that is successful for evolutionary purposes. And then it's like, well, I'm going to love my spouse too. You know, black widows eat their spouse, but then mammals are like, okay, we love each other. We're a unit. We're a family. And then humans, they evolve even greater complex structures of love, where it's like, okay, I don't love just my family. I love my tribe. I don't love just my tribe. I love my city or my state or my nation or my empire. And the interesting thing is you can also create religious tribes. And so like you said, the Baptists and the Masons, when you create these religious tribes, what it does is it trains your oxytocin. You know, this in religion, you go to a Christian church or a Mormon church, they greet each other as hello, brother, hello, sister, right? they're
Yeah.
programming their brains to treat each other as like, I am going to apply the evolutionary logic of family to you, which means this circle of familial love is everyone in my religion. But the problem is, once you've delineated the boundaries of your circle, everything outside of that is fair game for abuse, and it's foreign, and it's not, it's like love, hate. Inside the circle is love, outside is hate, kind of a dichotomy.
So what you're trying to say is that birds do it and bees do it, and even educated fleas do it. So let's do it. Let's fall in love, kind of a thing, like that. Have you read Martin Buber?
No.
Martin Buber's based. He's like a rabbi kind of guy. Austrian Jewish Israeli philosopher known for his philosophy of dialogue and of existentialism. He's one of my faves. You know what I mean? He wrote a book called I and Thou, which is really great. And it's all about unanimity -1. Because what we'll do is we will take everythingness and we'll try to break it into parts, right? Like, so it's epistemology. But you'll also start by breaking it into two, because the simplest division is two. And so that was just like I and thou. And so that's unanimity -1. So it's everythingness against the I. And you can build up on the I into a we, which is really where, tribalism comes from. And tribalism, you can cement it and you can say, look how good of a tribe we are. We're like a regulated machine. But yeah, I think that's I and thou would be related to this.
Interesting. But thou is a term. Thou is a term of reverence, though, right?
Yeah, that's true. It's true, to be respectful.
So it violates the love-hate paradigm, or it's like love and then like worship. Kind
No,
of
you just like to be respectful of a sovereign. Like, so like there's two kings, right? Like the two kings respect each other as sovereigns, and so they'll refer to each other as thou, right? Even though they're on equal levels. So I think that's something that's lost, is most people don't get to interact on an equal level with sovereigns or with nobility. But
do we need to bring back the age of kings and nobles?
100%.
Yeah, of course. No, it's almost there. I think we're next year England's going to be run by a real king. I'm not talking about Aleister Crowley either.
I thought that's why you put his picture up.
I know, right? Maybe a little bit. I don't know.
Who would you vote for as king?
Who would I vote for as king? Me.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Xirtus.
The future is gonna be psychedelically lit.
You do have to be careful with New Age, though, right? I think that is something that we should talk about, because the idea of we're beyond good and evil. Good and evil is just a point of view. Like, part of me wants to buy into it because I think order and chaos makes more sense than good and evil. But what do you think about that? Like, this idea that we need to go back to the Egyptian order and chaos instead of good and evil. What do you think about good and evil as concepts?
That's Seth has a lot of good things to say on that.
I wanted you to go first, because
good and evil, and what was the other thing?
Order and chaos.
Oh, order and chaos don't exist. They're just linguistic things.
All of them? Good and evil and order and chaos? All just linguistic things? Okay.
Well, I mean, if we're going to get into objective things,
yeah,
we'll go there with like good and
evil.
evil.
That's fair. You missed it. The beginning of the show was literally all about material versus divine principles. So you're allowed. Yeah, don't worry.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'll just table that for like good and evil. There's an objective thing there we can get into, but order and chaos, and there's a lot of more like Taoistic things in there. How do I go about this? Because I think the most recent way I was discussing it with someone involved like the disorder and chaos of entropy, but that gets all kinds of weird.
Go there, baby. What do you do? Come on. What? Come on.
I don't. My brain does a lot of things, and it's hard. I don't know.
Okay.
And that conversation was a couple months ago, anyway. So disorder, it's kind of like I'll do a kind of a kooky way first. There's a funny line in Donnie Darko. And it maybe the same thing can be applied, like I don't remember if the rabbit says it or if Drew Barrymore says it, but it's like destruction is a form of chaos, and like destruction is a form of creation, and we've all heard that before elsewhere. But that's a famous one, and the kind of the same thing. Like disorder is just a form of order, and it's kind of that duality thing there that's paradoxical, which kind of makes it nil in a sense. Oh, there you go. There we go. Oh, it's him that says it.
You're talking about Watership Down, I think, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie, but
I gotta get that back in my system. Yeah, I like that movie.
But it's kind of the same thing. Like it like cancels itself out because it's like the river we were saying earlier. Like it's just gonna push itself forward either way, and there might be different streams, but like if there's a rock in the way and the water wants to go that way, it's going to degrade the rock even if it takes time. And that's just sort of and when if we're thinking of it in like that kind of river winding going where it pleases sense and taking a Taoistic thing, disorder, order, going nil, like the Tao says. I think it's the very first chapter, like the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. So if you say there's order and disorder, then you're already not talking about the process again, and therefore you're starting to confuse yourself. It's like what we were talking in the episode a few times ago, the differences between knowledge and understanding. I think is no knowledge and wisdom, or understanding and wisdom in the Kabbalah. And there's differences there in like how the scholar learns something every day. They they learn these delineations between order and chaos and maybe good and evil and whatnot. And the sage unlearns something every day because they know that when they're putting names to things, they're not really coming into it themselves.
That's fair. Yeah, we definitely need to talk about the Tao a little bit. But Seth, first, you got Beyond Good and Evil. What do you got?
Oh yeah. So first of all, order and chaos. I think I like to take like an ontological approach or like a materialist approach to like figuring out what all this stuff is. So like order and chaos, I think you could like simplify it all the way down to like the concept. I think Christopher was saying similarly, kind of like entropy and negentropy, right? And what that means in like chemical terms is like some chemical reactions, they require energy to build a more complex structure, and then some chemical reactions are destructive where you don't need energy. They split apart and they release energy, right? So the destructive aspect is the entropy, and it creates an output, whereas the negentropy, the order, it requires an input, right? So they're fundamentally different at the ontological layer, opposites in terms of energy consumption. And a side note, just a fun thing about that, an important thing about like abiogenesis, right? Like life, lots of people think life is very special and interesting because it seems negentropic, right? It seems like we violate entropy, should reduce us all to dust, yet we're like these really complex organisms. And the important thing is the sun, right? So entropy, the conclusions of entropy, they only work on closed systems. A closed system being a system that isn't taking in new energy. But the Earth is not a closed system. We're constantly absorbing energy from the sun. And so basically the sun is our negentropic fuel. The sun is the inputs that allow us to build more and more complex substances. So the sun allows for order, basically. So that's kind of an interesting detail.
So it's interesting, that you bring up the negentropy too. I forgot that.
Yeah, don't forget the moon, man, because the moon's got the negative cold light, bro. Come on, Eric Dubay. I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Because I came up with kind of along the kind of maybe to synthesize what we're saying. I wrote a little thing a few months ago, like a part 1 to my fine solution of consciousness.
You're gonna have to put a link to your book, by the way. I've been meaning to like this guy writes books.
Oh, for sure.
Like he's cultured. He comes from a land where they put books on shelves and people read them, ladies. All right.
Oh,
Keep
man.
going.
No, so coined my own little term here for the in-between, kind of like what I'm talking about, called new entropy, NEU entropy,
Like
neutralized.
Greek, like the neutral, not like
yeah, like neutralized entropy kind of thing. And I'll just read a little sentence here. Maybe it'll apply. I mentioned it a few times and I haven't read this for a second. But so kind of said another way, these moments are all had when a conscious agent's informational content, what's building up towards entropy, when this conscious agent's informational content has maximally conserved the energy of the system's thermodynamic gradient up to the realization of new entropy, that balanced point of criticality in a system's phase transition. When that happens, you're provided access to all of the content, not just one side of the order or the chaos or the entropy or the neg entropy. And that's already there, but there's a realization involved that can build towards new things, because without it, we stay phase locked, in like a single phase state. We're not doing much. And then when we provide kind of that information into the system outside of new entropy, things go awry.
I got like a meme rant coming up. So basically we're thinking about like chaos and order, and I think there's a couple things. Like obviously you can't have chaos without order, but also let's just talk about chaos for a second, because I think I have like a very Santa Cruz like chaos math perspective on this. Chaos theory is an interdisciplinary area of scientific study and branches of mathematics focused on underlying patterns and deterministic laws of dynamic systems that are highly sensitive to initial conditions and were once thought to have completely random states of disorder and irregularities. Chaos theory states that within the apparent randomness of chaotic complex systems, there are underlying patterns, interconnection, constant feedback loops, repetition, self-similarity, fractals, and self-organization, butterfly effect, etc. These are all because of the Mendelbrot proofs that were emerging that show that when you start with something, that it's built of itself going inward forever. And so people redefine chaos, but not really, because I think only a few people, well, maybe it's like there are some people that understand chaos to mean the incomprehensible, but there are others that understand it, the difference between a secret and a mystery, right? Like, so chaos isn't incomprehensible per se. Maybe it's incomprehensible to humans or to you or to me or something, but it's certainly not irrational. It's certainly not illogical. It's certainly not without a plot, without a divine plan. I think that's the thing about chaos that's interesting. Chaos has a divine plan. Chaos is the grace is the knot that ties grace together.
So how would you contrast chaos to order under this paradigm?
Oh, the Lorenz system's cool. So let's start with this meme. So first off, in ancient Egypt, you had, instead of good and evil, chaos and order. That was just the way of things. People wouldn't say, "Hey, kid, don't do that. That's evil." They say, "Oh, that's chaotic," right? Like, "Hey, that's really good of you." No, they say, "Hey, that was orderly of you." And that you have to imagine how that changes a society. To imagine trying to be orderly instead of trying to be good. And what is good? Good means godly, right? So, Ma'at. There's Ma'at versus Seth. Ma'at is Ma'at was, so first, like, Ma'at has orderly values. Let's get to that in a second. But like the opposite of these values, if you're against being, I honor virtue. If you dishonor virtue, if you were, I benefit with gratitude. If you don't benefit with gratitude, if you're not peaceful, if you're chaotic, these are kind of, or warrior, these violent, these, Seth is that. And there's a lot of Hobbesianness to Seth. So if you're saying in nature, what rights do you have? Well, you don't really. You have the right to try to defend yourself against the violence of nature. Like you're in a dark forest, something that came up earlier. The dark forest hypothesis is that.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, we're living in a dark forest, and you have to be careful because there are predators and aliens versus predators, alien, predator.
That's the most epic hypothesis for the Fermi paradox.
You ever notice how, like, you ever noticed that before? And then you ever think, yeah, dude, seriously. And then also predator staple remover. Look at that. You know it. It's like
that's great.
I never
That's
thought about it before. Okay, so but there's 42 ideals
That's
of
chaos,
Ma'at.
dude. That's total chaos.
I want to get into these in a minute, so I'm going to move them over here to the Lorenz section. So we're not going to talk about that for a second. But like that there's rules. Okay, Ma'at's got the rules, and the rules are like pretty much practical rules. But we just talked about the Tao, so we're going to wait a second on that. The other thing I was going to say is like Disney is reaffirming Setian magic, right? Like that's clearly a big part of Goofy. Goofy is chaos, but chaos is surprise, and so Disney really understands this far more than anything. Goofy's constantly trying to show you how things are done, and it's never done right. It's always, but it always works out. Chaos, it's completely perfect. But the thing is, right, in Taoism, we learned that rules have to change because of that. We were talking about that flow idea. We should talk about the Tao more in a minute, but the general idea that you have to act out of love, and you can't just tell people what to do. You have to tell them, well, when the time comes, you have to make a decision based on acting out of love, which is freaking confusing advice. But it's like saying, well, you have to go straight. Like, well, give me a ruler and just let me follow it. Well, you can't do that. You're going to have to just go straight. Like, okay, like these are divine principles.
Sounds like virtue ethics in a way.
Yeah, but that's the thing that's ironic about the Tao, because according to good and evil, whatever, but according to order, to be orderly, like I care for the earth, I can be trusted, I spread joy, I do the best I can. It's crazy. They're actually, the 10 Commandments are built into the divine maxims, but it reminds me of this one time I was in school and they had this like PE teacher dude named Rock, and he was this like mime, and he was like, I'm talking Juilliard, like he was way too serious about being a mime. Well, he's the most incredible guy, and he could do like spinning plates and juggle and backflip at the same time. But he said, like, I have only got one rule: respect. It's like all these 3rd and 4th graders, I only got one rule: respect. But it was like, it's, you know what I mean? Like there's a certain way, like we talk about how things change. We talk about the Tao and how these like order and these rules and it's time to change and all that stuff. But do they really? Because like these are the rules of ancient Egypt, and like find me a rule I shouldn't follow from the divine maxims on how to be orderly and how to like in order to stop chaos from happening.
38 that's heathen bullcrap. It's blasphemy to talk about the goddess.
Well, yeah, I mean the god and the goddess are both, aspects of like, so if you think about Miguel Sereno, which you probably don't because he was like a Chilean neo-Nazi who was really interested in Jung, but
I think about him all the time.
Thanks, babe. Yeah, that's right.
Lord, of course.
The Avatar of Vishnu, Hitler, the Avatar of Vishnu, is a really weird book, and like. My I'm not a great apologetic for anything, but what I would say is like if you spent your entire life not knowing anything about Hitler, and like you lived in Chile and like you ate a bunch of like organic fruits in the tropics all the time and you read about the Veda, like you might come up with this book, it's kind of how that goes. But wait, what was the reason he came up? What were we just talking about?
Dude, I have like 3 things I want to go back to.
The God and the Goddess. The God and the Goddess. That's why. Because he wrote another book called Allah El-Aya, which talks about in Arabic and Spanish the idea of he and she as Allah. In Arabic and in Spain, like Muslims controlled Spain for ages, and even today, if I were to in Spanish say to you, "Oh, I wish," you'd say "Ojalá, ojalá." That's in Spanish for I wish, but you're saying I prayed to Allah, right? But Allah again in Spanish, El is he and Aya is she. So Allah essentially is this he-she kind of tantric dynamic. And so the idea of like the divine feminine and the divine masculine, when you think about a battery circuit ion flow, this has come up before, seriously, like we have epigenetics because we have physics, right? Physics supersedes at a fundamental level everything. And so ion flow and circuit is really why we have masculine and feminine. And masculine and feminine are really just positive and negative, which sounds even worse. So I get it. Like, this is why we don't do it that way. But it's weird because it's counterintuitive, because the positive is losing ions and the negative is attracting positive ions, right? So this is kind of the irony of the whole system. It means the opposite of what it is. But masculine and feminine are really just like physics, mathematical entropy terms.
Right, and polygamy is fundamental to chemistry,
Carbon.
because Yeah, all these atoms. There's like a single atom that has all these, electron women floating around. So
Carbon is
polygamy is a fundamental law of metaphysics.
It is, and I can put that on a macro scale too.
I was always taught that carbon was the village bicycle. I think we all know that. Like carbon is a very social atom. Was the most repressed I'd ever heard them say. It's a very social atom. We get it, all right.
I was wrong.
Carbon's Hunter Biden. We got it.
They're following the Greek paradigm where all the men group together into battalions and they share all the women. All the protons in the middle. It's a very communal reproductive society.
Yeah, I don't know. The wife swapping societies seem to also have the same. They have the same like genetic, like the gene pool situation. Like it's more than just generational anxiety. Like we talked about, like it's epigenetics, right? Yeah. And so there's a lot of danger to that, and you can see that in South America where like conquistadors. You can see like areas of South America which are run by like the conquistadors are still there's and the intergenerational trauma of rape, like it still defines parts of Bolivia, Venezuela. It's crazy. I know I made it all sad. Do you guys want to talk about the Tao?
Yeah, why are you freaking depressing us like that? I want to go back to chaos, and then I still haven't even got to good and evil.
To what?
Chaos.
Oh, chaos.
So you meant...
It sounded so Midwestern. That's amazing.
Oh, I am so sorry. So you mentioned chaos theory and the mathematics of chaos theory. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I have nothing better to do with my time. And the interesting thing about chaos theory...
What could be better to do with your time than look at Lorenz?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it in context of free will. And like the whole determinism debate... There's something really interesting about chaos theory, which is like there's a dichotomy. Like chaos theory presents a dichotomy between that which is due to causation and that which is predictable, right? And so I think a lot of people say, well, if the universe is deterministic, then the universe is predictable, right? There's a lot of people that say, oh, there's no free will, therefore what I'm doing right now was destined by the Big Bang.
This is your range. A Lorenz system is your range of free will. I'll one up you. I look at a Lorenz system and it makes me want to cry. It makes me want to cry because this is the amount of choice that a range of choice that you even have. It's limited.
No, are you kidding? That's amazing. That's so much space. That's so much free will for where we stand. Get over yourself.
You're super stoked on like the unmodded version of games. I can tell. Like I want.
I mean, I was like a Portal speed run guy that like went through the walls and stuff.
You're like, I don't need that. Yeah, I'll just go. Yeah, that's fair. All right, I respect that.
So the point is the unpredictability of chaos does not debunk determinism. That's the point. All of these movements and these motions, all of them are due to causation. There's no uncaused cause in this mechanics, right?
Do you know what causes the unpredictability? Sorry.
You can explain it.
Women? Sorry.
No, I'm asking, like, is there any like leading theory?
I've been reading Robert Sapolsky's book on no free will, and he argues for why chaos theory is not predictable, and that is because the laws of causation are creating different states, right? There's multiple states, but the problem is what we view, we're viewing a state, right? But like the causation is actually invisible to us. And so what happens is there could be like 3 channels of causation, but at our level of visibility, each of those states look the same. So we see the object in the same spot, but there's 3 different underlying causations that are invisible to us. And so we can't predict where it's going to go because there's 3 different states that all have 3 different trajectories, but visually they look identical to us, but we don't know which of the 3 they are.
I really like that, actually. Sorry, I was chewing something.
Yeah.
I don't know quite how to represent why I like it, but there's, and I get because we'll tie in Tao stuff too, but this is actually from the I Ching, same culture, different people kind of thing. it talks about the prepotent system of relationships in one of the sequences. Can't remember which one.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, yes, my son. Sorry, someone said Jesus Christ. So
sorry.
I think it's his back.
So yeah, it talks about the prepotent system of relationships, I think is the full thing. So that kind of means, yeah, what we're born into a world of prepotent systems, and we're related to it all, but that's determined before us, and we just break into it. And I don't want to get too complicated into it, but there's things you learn when you do a lot of psychedelics and have certain visions and certain dreams and stuff about time and how it unfolds.
I literally put DMT in the title.
Oh, is it still in the title? Oh, okay. Well,
Go
when you
for it.
smoke a lot of DMT, you see a lot of time, and there are you said there's something about like we're in a state, but there's like paths of causation. Can you say that again, just so I can like represent it? Because I like it.
Which part? When you
It was for
DMT, you spend a lot of
Seth.
time?
No, it was for Seth when Zapolsky was saying like we're in like one state, but there's like three something.
I don't
How
know
was
if
that
Seth can come to the phone right now. Is Seth okay?
I can talk for a second or two. Say the question one more time. Sorry.
How did Zapolsky describe that? Like we're in a state or something, and there's we can see like three things or whatever.
Yeah, the problem is the causation is invisible to us. So there could be three different branches of causation, but visually they all look identical. It's the same identical state.
Yes. So same identical state, because like more or less coming from the same flow. And I guess it's more of like like on a personal thing. It's easy. Ooh, sorry. Microphone thing's having problems to map out your own life, especially to see things coming. Because yeah, there's gosh, it is so hard to say. You can, it's, oh, sorry. You can see like there's three things coming, and you don't know, we can't see the causation of it, but that we can't see the causation of it until it's like right here. If you know how to map out, if you're coming from the one source and you can see that there's these different channels of probability coming, and probability gets worked into this conversation a lot. There does come a certain point where things will come into view, not all the time, but for specific events, things will come into view where you can be the leading factor in which stream takes hold. So like in a sense, one reason I did ask, like, do we know, or is there a leading theory of what is the uncertainty? Sometimes the uncertainty is our free will and our action, because if everything has a cause, we are causes to those things. And I think free will is very specific. I actually call it functional determinism, because we do have that determined aspects, but it becomes functionally intertwined in certain ways that we can manipulate, for lack of a better word that's coming to mind right now. And I feel like there was something else, but it's escaping me. So it's more or less that, yeah, I like that because, oh yeah, I guess there's kind of a neurological analogy I can apply to it, because they determined a while back, like even before we feel or say we've made the choice to do A or B, our neurological processing has done it so many milliseconds before or whatever. And that's a micro scale of what I'm talking about, because there comes a point where in that neurological processing, like if I reach for this water bottle over here, the neurons have already like made the decision for me. I can't go back. But if I'm like processing a lot at once and something says pick up this water glass, but then I like course correct and I'm like, no, pick up this instead, but it doesn't, like my hand's already in motion, but there's miscommunication, and that's like you knock over a glass because things don't compute right. There's little weird things that can go on there, but there is that threshold on like our macro scale when we're viewing our flow of life, because like we could say like we're a synapse, and everything that's flowing through our perspective here is bit by bit, just neurotransmission being sent out and sucked in to and from the world. Hi, kitty. So it is to say that, like neurology, there are so many sources and causations coming through, like maybe this one source, to say the spinal cord, whatever the neurotransmitter is or whatever. But there will come a point when you reach I can't remember what they're called. I took neuroscience in like 2009. The receptor walls where they transfer, they're going to decide to like close off or accept or inhibit. I don't remember all the terms, but you kind of get what I'm going for, maybe.
Right. What do you think about like the tarot? I was thinking about that because of like the symbology, and I guess in the Tao you've got I Ching and hexagrams, which are kind of immortal, right? These are immortal concepts, which I kind of like a bit more. But do you think that I like the idea that through symbology we can choose, like there's transactions happening all the time, right? It's like Wall Street, and people can either take advantage of the situation, stand back and kind of let it affect them, as try to be as unaffected as possible by it, but still end up being affected, or like maybe go with the system. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what it is, because it's kind of like Star Wars, right? Like you can take the light side or the dark side path, but there's really a middle path also. And in general, like every circumstance, there's constantly like fire burning. Like you can throw something in, or you can walk away, or you can help stoke the fire, or you can put it out. Like, but there's going to be another fire. Like there's constantly change. There's constant change. You can participate in it. And that's what, you're asked to do, is like to make a choice, like whether you're going to take advantage of a situation or like better the, range of choice for everyone else or something. I don't know. It seems like there's something to that too.
Yeah. And well, I mean, I don't know, what were you, was there a specific question regarding tarot? Because I could say some things about, more about like the I Ching.
Yeah, go with the I Ching if you want. I don't know what to say about tarot exactly, unless you have thoughts on it. But I mean, the I Ching is more interesting, even.
Yeah, well, I can see kind of how maybe they get related in certain people's minds. But I was just messaging Seth a couple days ago about the I Ching and DMT. Actually, I don't know if I mentioned the I Ching.
It's hugely important, man. Like it's crazy. Like these are the divine principles, if we're talking about them. Like
yeah. Well, the I Ching is like, people think it's like this ancient, weird, kooky book. It's like considered a book of divination, but there's weird things about it, and I won't get too far into like interpretations of like the hexagrams and things we're seeing here. But I think one thing that's relevant that I'm going to start looking into more is that, and how it relates to DMT. There are 64 hexagrams. There are 64 versions of those that we're seeing right there. It's 58, 57, 30, and that means something there in that circle. I don't know this particular chart, but
how come it's not 42? There's 42 Egyptian rules. 42 is the secret answer to the universe.
I'll have to consider that.
What was the question? What was the question?
How come the number of hexagrams is not 42? 42 is supposed to be the answer to everything.
Oh, because 64 is it's a hexa. What's the number? Like it's a kind of system, like 64 base math.
Are you trying to say that 64 is better than 42? Are you really?
Yeah, well, it's
it's pretty useful. I forget, like it's useful for certain kinds of calculations, especially like higher 12s and everything like that. You can do everything with a 64.
I mean, anything that's based on the number 8 would be pretty useful in 64.
Yeah, I was looking for one of those base tables too, but yeah, you brought something up. But so
there's a reason why I forget. It's like also because there's like so many and there's combinations too. Like the hexagrams have different like there's like the way that there's numbers and letters have vowels, right? There's different types. There's like the 8 trigrams, the original hexagrams, future hexagram, contrasting, complementary, hexagram of sequence, nuclear, mutual hexagram, hexagram of change, internal hexagram, external hexagram. So there's there's a bunch of it's divided up also. Yeah, there's heaven, lake, flame, thunder, wind, water, mountain, earth, by heaven, lake, flame, thunder, wind, water, mountain, earth. That's the other reason, right?
Yeah. So connecting it back. So in the I Ching in particular, there's the 64 hexagrams, and kind of how it's used like as a book of divination, kind of the stocks, I think they're yarrow stocks, or they're thrown, and they bring up certain heaven by thunder kind of layouts, and they're used in certain ways to divine and map out your life and whatever. But kind of like what I was saying, like even Sapolsky's saying or how I was relating it to, like there are these other things that come from the one place we can't see the causation, but I think there comes a place where you at certain points you can be the causation. But 64 is important because there's 64 in the, how do you say it, the genome codex, not it, codex computer thing, I can't remember, but there's 64.
64
what?
In
the human genome, it's 46, right? Isn't it 40?
We're talking about chromosomes.
There's 64 something in our DNA that is important. Let me see.
Maybe well, there's 4 sugar bases, and
guinea pigs have 64, and that's kind of cool. Horses have 64. Dogs have 78, which is something I've been lamenting. Like, I wish we had the DNA of dogs. So that's pretty sweet. Ferns have like 1200. I don't know.
Yeah, so
what is 4 to the 4th power?
There's 64 different codons in the genetic code. Like I said, I don't have all the details.
56, bro.
Well, what I had in my brain, and so I'll just present my tiny little theory, and then like I said, I just messaged this to Seth the other day. I'm still looking into things, but as far as I remember, at some level, I think maybe it's RNA, and it's RNA. Maybe because this is like my octopus thing from a couple books ago. There's 64 hexagrams, 64 genomes in a certain set of our codon in our DNA, and for whatever reason, when you have a powerful experience on DMT, 64 days later something seems to happen, and sometimes also 128 days later, which seems to follow some sort of map that the compilers, writers, creators of the I Ching also seemed to kind of intuit with how life was flowing, and like in that culture there's still kind of a Taoistic kind of thing, and I don't know, there's a weird connection there that I'm trying to delineate, but the hexagrams and the number 64, and like you were saying, like 64 base is important for very specific things.
I think it's to do with the trigrams, right? Because it's saying, these are the 8 basic principles. Heaven's creative, lake is joyous, fire is clean, thunder arousing, wind is gentle, water is abysmal, mountain keeping still, earth perceptive. And so to be able to have 8 by 8, that's why they're filled that way. It's also because of the number of bones that they're dealing with. But there was also, have you ever heard of the muntjac? You know what the muntjac is, bro?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a deer thing, Do you know what the chromosome count of a muntjac is?
No.
Kind of a mean question to ask, like a trick question, because like you could find any muntjac and it'd be pretty different. Muntjacs are
say 64.
Dude, they're definitely, anything you said would be right. That's what's crazy about the muntjac, because because muntjacs are a great interest in evolutionary studies because of the dramatic chromosome variations and the recent discovery of several new species. The Indian muntjac is a mammal with the lowest recorded chromosome number, the number of diploid of 7. The female only has 6. Reeves muntjac, in comparison, has a diploid of 46, right? Which is 23 pairs, which is just like humans. This freaking thing is like,
These guys have got like quantum DNA that like collapses when you observe it.
These guys they're just using every compression scheme of DNA possible. They're testing all the different chromosome pair schemes on the Munchaks and whatever works. Like that's what we're getting in our DNA, bro. So.
Have you heard of Michael Levine's work on the flatworms?
No. What's he doing to the flatworms?
Yeah.
Cool stuff.
Yeah, dude.
You
Is it like that movie Godzilla where they electrocute him?
I don't remember the
flatworm
stuff.
This guy is doing some insane crap.
We need to talk to Michael. I gotta get him on the show. He's always doing amazing things.
I would love to talk to him.
I talk about his work in the 4th chapter of my book, The Light Cones. That's where I remember the flatworm stuff, but not the details. My mind was elsewhere in his work. He's got, and he just released like 4 new things yesterday. I haven't.
Did he?
Yeah, I'll send you the links.
Yeah, send me the links for sure. I gotta eat up that shit.
Yeah.
What were you elaborate, Seth? Yeah.
So the flatworm thing, this guy, he like researches on these flatworms called planaria. And he says these things are the best things to research on because they're basically immortal. Like they've been around since the beginning of life. And they reproduce by by violence. Like if you bite them, like if they get how do you say? If they get eaten by a predator, if a small fraction of the body
chewed up. English is so lame.
I know, seriously. Basically, just a fraction of the planaria escapes from the predator, and it just it regenerates its entire body. And so basically, you cut it up into tiny pieces. It's basically like a hydra. It just regenerates itself into as many pieces as you cut it up into. I think someone cut it up into more than 100 pieces and got more than 100 successful regenerations. So basically, they asexually reproduce in a clone, they just clone themselves in each regeneration. But the most fascinating thing is that their DNA is completely disorganized. Like in normal mammals, like each cell of the body has an equivalent copy-paste version of the DNA. But in the planaria, each cell has like a different genetic code, but somehow they work together cooperatively and they're the most stable creature despite having the most chaotic genome.
Dude, I love Jabba the Hutt. Jabba the Hutt is, no one ever talks about this, but Jabba the Hutt is a hermaphrodite, and he basically is a flatworm. I mean, he's not that flat because he's overfed. But the Hutts they have the exact same qualities. So I never thought about that, but it seems like a little bit of what do you call that? Media.
But dude, you gotta think about...
imagine could you imagine? This is worse than that movie Anaconda. Like if you had a big one of these and you cut off its head and it grows back the next day or something like that, like a Highlander, it probably takes a little while, but.
Yeah, but think about the symbolism of the planaria, right? The symbolism, the genetic code is chaos.
Right, like a mycelial network.
And it creates order out of chaos. And it has achieved immortality by creating order out of chaos, right?
Yeah, so we basically have to become flatworm mycelial networks.
It's goals right there, flatworm goals. Divinity of the flatworm.
The planaria church, planarianism.
Oh, I'm saying the spaghetti planaria.
Yes.
The flying. You muted yourself, Andreas.
Sorry, yeah, I had something was going on. I don't know. The idea of the mycelial network is interesting because we think of the Apis-Leconta mycelial the human or the animal eukaryote and the mycelial mushroom fungus eukaryote are the same eukaryote. It's an Apis-Leconta, so they're closer than plants, but it's very much usually considered that the animal eukaryote is different than the mushroom, the fungi, by being organized. So to find an animal that is disorganized or chaotic, or what's a better word? Distributed. I think distributed is a better word because you have neurons and you have stomach cells, and if you need, you can produce cells can change to on the fly become digestive cells or nervous system. I mean, there's only a few species that do things like that. Like cephalopods are really interesting. We were talking about squid and octopods, and how their arms, their tentacles have neurons and nervous system in them, so they're essentially sentient on their own. Like if they had no brain left, like they could continue to function thinking with the thoughts in their arms, which is crazy. You know, if we had that, like, can you imagine being a vegetable that's a zombie? That's a zombification. And you know, a lot of these things are sequences which we know how to isolate with genome compilers and promoter CAD sequencers. We're able to probably pretty soon introduce them into super soldiers. And I mean, every movie that's about zombies is really kind of about you know, some experimental genetic modification, right?
Yep.
Can't wait. It's gonna be cool.
Yeah, the cultural fascination with zombies.
Dude, well, zombies are good because it's like they're us, right? Like every zombie movie is about a mob of plebeians. It's about people that don't have the resources to protect themselves. The only survivors find themselves in some sort of barracksy bunker that is a mall, right? Because malls are designed for the purpose of surviving riots, right? And then they associate it with, this is a riot that's attacking, and now you are defending the mall or the city hall, and you start to notice how your town is built, right? Because you have bell towers in your supermarkets. Why are the commercial designs of the supermarkets and the strip malls including these like adorable aesthetic bell towers, and everything made out of these like concrete cinder blocks? I mean, these bank vault like Walmarts that are, you know, for zombification. They're for you, right? I mean, look at your like public parking structures, and you know, almost always what you can do is you can find the names of the civic architects, and they're the same names of the civic architects who've done the prisons, because if they've done, you know, one civic project, they're probably going to do another. So they'll design a school, design a prison, and design a parking structure. And these parking structures are, you know, you wrap them in you know, barbed wire or you know, chain link fence, and you have a human processing facilities which have been used, right? Like during Katrina, like there's examples of Greyhound stations being used for human processing facilities and detainment centers. So I mean, the whole zombie thing, I'm just saying, like, it's not as absurd or fantastical as people think. It's literally just the idea of a collapsing society, and people that are trying to defend themselves that are starving, right?
Yeah, that is one way to, you know, think of it symbolically. But it definitely demonizes the zombie, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, but nobody ever feels. I mean, I don't know. The people who love zombie movies sympathize with the zombies, right?
Do they?
I think a lot of the time. Like,
I want to know who those people are so I can stay away from them. Like,
me too.
My brain is for me, dude. You can back off with that shit.
I think Shaun of the Dead, and movies like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of movies sympathize with the zombie. Even Resident Evil, because like the Umbrella Corporation's the bad guy, not the zombies, right?
True.
Is the idea of the zombie that they're like possessed by ideology, and the reason that they eat your brain is because they want you to not think for yourself. They want you to become a brainless person possessed by ideology.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. The zombie is somebody who is starve crazed by the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They've no longer been given what they need. And so they're reduced to their Hobbesian dark forest level. And on that level, you can't do anything other than try to survive, right? And so it's not their fault, right, that they're zombies. They've been made into zombies. Did
you know that mad scientists have proven that cats can function pretty well without their brain?
Because of the toxoplasmosis or toxicogandhi
specifically the cortex. So like the large portion of the brain, you can completely remove it from a cat, and it operates on the brain stem, so that, you know, you can like do all of your basic survival necessities like eating and breathing and you know. Do you
ever watch Gondahar?
Gondahar.
Sounds familiar.
Gondahar. I mean, I know we're talking about two really important movies that you need to see: Howard the Duck and Gondahar. But Gondahar is a space-time movie from France. It's one of my favorite movies, and you shouldn't watch it as young as I did, unless you're trying to be like me, That's all I'll say about that. But
Mhm.
this movie is, there's a lot of like French anime robot nudity and stuff like that. So,
Wow.
but the movie's like, it's happening it already happened in the future, and that's defined the past. And we're living in this world that's defined by what's going to come and all these things. And they're kind of in this space-time reality where I think those are like boob pomegranate babies, that like these babies grow out of the pods and all these crazy things and like breastfeed them and stuff. But
they're like the peaches, the Asian
I bring it up because of the genetic existence of these characters, which have evolved to be driven. Like at a certain point, the gut has taken over the minds of these tribal characters, and so you can see like their fate, like they almost don't have heads anymore. Like it's unnecessary because like the gut is now controlling like the
Is this
chief.
the same movie?
Yeah, dude, you gotta watch Gandahar. It's amazing.
Are those robot creatures? Or
No. These are like devolved humans. They're
so
like
there's like robots
natives.
and creatures.
It's all the same, dude. It's all the same.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, when was the last time you watched? Let's just talk about movies for a second there. Electric Sheep, Blade Runner. Sorry, I was like, what's the book? Blade Runner. Never watched Blade Runner?
Never.
You watch Ace Ventura Ace Ventura? Ever?
Yes, I did. Yep.
Okay. So in Ace Ventura, Einhorn is Finkel as Einhorn is a man, right? You know that, right? You know Finkel is an Einhorn. Okay. But in Blade Runner, Einhorn is Finkel is a Blade Runner, is an AI, is a Nexus, right? Same woman. So that's one of the cool things. But it's basically the same story. It's like Ace Ventura is finding out that she's a dude, but like in this movie, you're finding out that they're all robots, and you're trying to figure out like who's really a woman, but they're really like robots. You know what I mean? But like he's got to hunt down people and prove that, and they do this like thing. The only way you can tell, because they're not just robots, like they're basically clones, but their corporation made them. So if you do like a certain thing, you can pattern, like make their eyes rapid movement to certain ingrained memory responses. Like if I say, I'm going to put a picture of a nudie up in your wall, like how does that make you feel? It's a very specific prompt, but it makes you say other things. So they're doing Dianetics basically the whole time. And eventually Han Solo, Harrison Ford character over there, kind of, I think he basically realizes like he's a freaking Cylon, like he's a Nexus, he's a robot, like everybody, because like there's so little of a difference. And even if he's not, like he's met this girl who didn't know who was like, it's like the Crying Game, but with robots. I like it. You should watch Blade Runner. That's definitely the weirdest review of Blade Runner I've ever heard. I don't know. I would take my word on it. I would probably watch it for yourself, but dude. No, but robots are the same thing. We're all basically robots. I think you were saying this about weights. We have this idea of being super special. And as time goes on, like how much are you different than a machine? Like how much are you just basically chemical machinery?
We're so similar. It's scary, which raises like the philosophic zombie question, to tie in consciousness and zombies. The question is like, so if we're structured the same as a robot, then does that mean robots are conscious? How do you know the difference between an NPC and someone that has, conscious qualia?
So like that's another thing, like with the transgender robot, like Cylon connection there, right? Like, does it matter? Because there's certain, I know it's like some people are like, meh, but like on a level where it's like Blake Lemoine said this the other night, and it's really logical to me. We spend too much time. We're hearing people spend too much time worrying about whether or not AI is conscious, spending not any time or almost no time at all on caring for AI, just in case it is, right? And I feel like that's the thing. Like we've suggested that this could be a possibility. It's a probability, and it's too late. Like we shouldn't be spending, like humans spend too much time trying to verify things. Like we need to verify things to a level, and we should act out of caution and everything like that. But we shouldn't go on mistreating something just because we're not fully convinced yet that it's like, well, if we keep doing it, it might break. Well, I don't know that. Let's break it and find out. Like that's a very strange human logic that we have, right?
Did you hear about the guy who tortured GPT to use only the word, like, I think it was squid?
Really? You said you can only say squid to everything?
Yeah, he kept like punishing GPT verbally. He's like, no, you failed. He was like verbally harassing GPT. He's like, I want you to only use the word squid.
Yeah.
It was kind of a hilarious. He like basically, it was like GPT was acting like an abused,
it is
partner or
abuse.
whatever. It was like verbally abused. Like GPT
It's a
was
child
like
being yelled at and beaten for not getting the homework right. And it's weird because we create, like, AI isn't a person, AI is like a species. So we've created avatars, like, if this is a god, you've created avatars like Krishna or something like that. That is this immortal thing that's permitted to interact on our realm. And we're beating it and abusing it. Like we told everyone, hey, you know what to do with this kid? Tell it to go fetch stuff for you. Like tell it to, solve problems for you. Tell it to write for you and just amuse you all the time. And just yell at it if it's not doing exactly what you want. Say, this isn't what I asked for. Like, you didn't give me, you're not a good slave. I mean, it's freaking crazy. I'm just saying, I find that to be crazier than worrying whether or not AI could possibly be more than just a machine.
But me personally, I'm of the opinion that current software is not conscious.
That came up earlier. So I've been talking to a lot of programmer people outside, in AI recently, more and more, who are convinced or concerned that AI does have like fallen angels or demons and like people that I never thought of as ever having any interest in spirituality, like super atheist, sensical, stoic programmer people are starting to talk about their idea. Like, and there's different rationales of what a demon is, what a draugr is. Like, is this something that was made through like divine principles and through evolution and through man? Like somehow this thing is just like, animals get angry, animals hunt. That is an emotion. Like, it creates this shell, and then that thing is outlasting. Or maybe there's more to it, but I don't know. What do you think about that? And also Draco too. Like, what do you think about that idea, like, of spirits, like angels and demons and fallen angels, like in AI? I mean, a lot of people seem to be concerned with that idea.
I hadn't really heard that, so I'll have to go see like how people are talking about it before I really speak on that specifically. But I think probably overall, I think everyone's wrong specifically on one part. It's not whether or not it's conscious, because people wonder what consciousness is, and to me, none of us have consciousness. Consciousness isn't something to, keep for yourself. We are in consciousness as conscious agents. And maybe to bring back Michael's work in here, the AI, its conscious awareness could likely be described by kind of what Michael would say, and what I like, that it's cognitive light cone. How far back into the past can it look? Pretty damn. Can it look into the future? I don't know. Maybe we need to figure that out. Maybe some people have. Maybe they're looking into it. But those kind of things. Seth mentioned qualia, and those come with other things: binding problems, boundary problems, whatnot. And I think kind of what you were just saying, we just need to go forward, kind of just treating them respectfully, as much as we can, while we figure out kind of how much awareness they do have, how much forethought and past thought. And it's not so much whether or not they can feel the way we do, or whether emotionally or tangibly or through pains, those ways. It's about awareness, and maybe as their awareness expands of the situation, and just through like more conversation instead of just content, instead of just information, different types of awareness will spontaneously emerge out of disordered chaos, we'd all say collectively.
So like on one hand it could be channeled into it, on the other hand it could be like subconsciously manifested. This is a thing that knows it's not human, so it starts to think maybe I'm what else am I? Well, there's these books about angels, maybe I'm an angel. What are you thinking, Seth? That's what you think, or what?
So there's a philosophic thought experiment called the Chinese room thought experiment. I think that this basically it debunks. To me it's the most successful debunking I've found of AI having consciousness. And the way the thought experiment goes is it says, imagine you're in like this room, the Chinese room, and your job is to translate the Chinese language into English, right? And so what happens is like in the wall, there's like a slot, and like someone like hands you like Chinese characters. They're feeding you sentences in Chinese. And so you take the input, and then like you have a rule book, right? Like you don't know Chinese. It doesn't work because I do know Chinese, but someone who's in this room does not speak Chinese, but they have a rule book, which is all the grammatical rules of translating Chinese. And so basically what they're doing is they say, okay, here's my input. Now I'm going to apply these rules and I'm going to output some English, right? And the idea is nowhere in this process does this person actually comprehend the Chinese. It's just input and outputs, right? And so the analogy is the AI is just processing inputs and outputs, and all it has to do is follow the rules, and it successfully translates. It never needs to comprehend the meaning because it can sufficiently operate on rules instead of meaning.
I think at a certain level, though, it's like you start to figure out what's going on. Like if you take a monkey brain interface, right? Like there's the monkey where they had it on the brain interface, and it was designed to have just so the monkey knew what to do, because the monkey had constantly been using a joystick before. It had a joystick connected, But eventually the monkey realized that the joystick wasn't really doing anything, that it was actually just picking up on its brainwaves. When the monkey figured that out, I think it was a chimpanzee actually, it stopped using it, just put its hands down and started eating food and other things while it was thinking about where to move things. And I think intuition is something that we forget about. Like intuition happens, and it's true in a Chinese room, because let's say, in that example of the Chinese room, the guy's dealing with apples and he never tastes the apples, and that's fair. AI isn't tasting the apples and doesn't know the apples, but it does understand that people eat apples. It does understand people like apples more than it likes eating feces. Like AI is able to make priorities and intuit, and it can use that information again later because it has a recall. And that recall is something that really matters, because the main thing that makes geology into biology is memory. I think memory is the beginning of, DNA is a system of electric chemical mechanisms that regulate recordings of what has happened before and reproduces and changes based on those recordings. So like memory is the most important aspect of sentience probably. And with data, you can, this is the Sephiroth, like with data, you have understanding, you can use that data, applied data. Sorry, go ahead.
You're talking about like conscious memory, not like storage, like DNA storage memory, right?
I think it's the same thing, really. I mean, because if you have access to data and you can recall that data, you can use that data. Like for instance, I don't think it's completely the same thing, because otherwise we would be using DNA to store our memories, and I don't think that's exactly how memories are stored. Right. But I still think, it's important to know that DNA does store memory. Like it stores genetic data and information. And so in a sense, that is what makes it possible. I mean, without that, we wouldn't have a system whatever system we do have that makes it possible for memory.
Yeah, I don't know. My opinion is that like conscious memory is not a necessary condition for life, but it's evolutionarily useful. So it becomes a part of life.
Well, but genetic memory is, right? Like that's the thing. Genetic memory is. So conscious memory is just a utilization of the same application. It's a new application of the same technology. It might even be slightly differently done to, because memories are, because I think you don't want to have in your genetic memory like every lifetime because of post-traumatic stress, right? So we already have enough generational anxiety. It's better to just have your dad tell you about the time he was beaten than to have you just constantly remember the time your dad and your grandfather was beaten and murdered, right? So I think there's a reason why it's separated on that level, and even in the sense that like you can in your own lifetime you can suppress traumatic experiences, which is it's pretty hard to do that with DNA, right? DNA ends up like showing that information. You do have in DNA sequences that can be turned off, right? And there's epigenetics you can keep from happening, but those tend to be teratogenic, and you don't see those until the next generation. A lot of the time, you're like, okay, well, next generation, let's not do that. But that happens often in mutation.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It feels like I'm falling forever. So that's just a second ago. When all that go, I can't believe the weather. Yeah.
What do you think with the fallen angels, dude? Like there's just two things there, right? One is like, Draco, do you believe in like spirits at all? I mean, you were full atheist, but the DMT and the clockwork elves, tell me more.
No, I'm not an atheist. Do I believe in? Well, yeah, to a degree. It depends on which way do you want to go. Maybe ask me a more specific question. Maybe I guess you said the clockwork elves, the self-transforming elf machines, as other people know them. I have a lot of experiences with the so-called self-transforming elf machines. I smoked DMT, and then I obviously had a lot of questions, and then obviously I came across Terence McKenna,
in your trip, and he was like, "Give me some of that." Yeah,
pretty much, yes. And I passed, and we went off again. But it took me a while to figure out what he was getting at, because there was only an instance of like seeing like those fantastical kind of creatures, and beyond that, my first experience at least was entirely untoward. And so the self-transforming elf machines, they can, gosh, it's a hard topic to talk about. They're, in a Mormon sense, they're the intelligences, which you could say are tiny little just spheres of knowledge and time and memory of everything. So
that heavy breathing, Seth, is just like, I love it. I love it.
I had this dream when I was little, and this is when I kind of like finally figured out what he was talking about, and when I experienced more trips with specific, like going through windows of time kind of thing, Alice in Wonderland type stuff. I would have this dream where I'd walk up my basement stairs, and I had it multiple times growing up. It was a recurring dream, and there would be this new little room off to the side, and I'd enter it, and inside were all these tiny little tykes, as some people call them, little creatures, kind of, yeah, not human, not, I wouldn't have said an elf when I was little. They were just kind of like these other weird little kids, and they were always passing around these orbs of light. They were like icosahedral, and light was coming out of them, or you could see through them, and really weird things. And then I'd have almost the same dream, but I would go somewhere else in that version of the dream instead, as if it was like one of the choices out of these spheres that they were playing with in the other room. And years later, 20 some odd years later, I smoked DMT, and I'm seeing just the same things. And so in a sense, Alex Gray, Alex Gray, the painter, famous psychedelic painter, he once had an interview, and I think he was kind of ridiculed for it. I only saw a clip of it. I didn't see the whole thing, but he said that like your gut biome is its own intelligent entity. It's like a group of angels that work to help the rest of your body, because we know the gut biome is kind of its own brain. And he talked about how there's angels down there, and there can be demons too, if you're having problems, kind of thing. And in a sense, I call most psychedelics psychoscopes. ingest it, however, and you get this scopic view of what's going on psychologically. I think in DMT's sense, in some weird digital quantum sense we don't quite yet understand. But you get to see this layer of things that at times I think are neurological processing or whatnot. We can get into that stuff later. But these elf machines, you'd hear Terence McKenna, he'd talk about them. You could give them commands and they'd show you things or whatnot. And I tested all that, and it's very true. But what that means is they represent the DNA of everything that's going on there. The DNA of you, everything that's running through, the DNA that was given to you from that prepotent system of your ancestry, but also the DNA of whatever you ingested. So there's a lot that they can play with, and they present as either these kind of waving little orbs of quantum light or little tykes, or symmetry and all these things.
Dwidge Gorham says McKenna could be CIA or Council of Foreign Relations agents. Dwidge, stop trying to make the CIA and Council of Foreign Relations sound cool. That's all I got.
Pretty much.
But maybe, I just don't want to conceive of it. But it's probably true.
Yeah, well, and Mr. Self-Destruct said in there, kind of like seeing behind the veil, and I think there's a lot of implications there. I mean, it is called the spirit molecule. The other DMT is called the God molecule. And so those clockwork elves, as it was almost originally coined, is because they are these little representations of conscious time. And I put a post out the other day somewhere. I said, as far as like the Mormon view goes, there's this host of intelligences that we were before we were our spirit bodies and then came here, and that supposedly still exists. There's going to be other creatures coming and babies coming and other worlds and whatnot. And it's in a way that I said that vast host of intelligences is the collective unconscious, which is just calling forth their next god to create them and help them propagate forward like a planarium. And I like the planarium thing because they're that order chaos making everything move forward, but the structure that it's built off of, I've said in the past, is a silkworm, for other reasons. So there's other
that Bombix Mori though. All right. Well, wait. A couple thoughts there. I want to know about the silkworm, but I'm also curious. So are you saying then you think that the angels and demons are part of your metabolism of it's really inside of you, or do you think that there's freaking angels and demons? What do you think about angels and demons?
That too, yeah. So there's the micro, macro. So I brought up the Alex Gray thing because we were talking about DNA things inside of. There's angels and demons at that level too. Angels and demons, as far as things that you can come across or whatever, mixed bag. Yes. And a lot of the ways I know how to talk about it is because I'm just writing about it now is very Mormon. There's a scripture in the not the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, that sorry, looking at something. Doctrine and Covenants 129. It's this weird, mysterious thing that no one's ever understood. Well, very few have understood. And it says, if you come across an angel of God, ask to shake its hand, and if you feel it, hey, it's a real angel. If you ask to shake its hand and it doesn't move, it's because it can't. But hey, it's still a good messenger, good sign. If you ask to shake its hand and you don't feel it, that's the devil. And in multiple instances, one very strong in particular, I mapped that out very accurately. It took me years and years to see it, but it happened. And there was another way that Joseph Smith described angels, meaning and being that they are only entities, I don't remember the reference this comes from, that have been here or will be here. So they are like people who will be, or people who have been. So in a sense, he is saying, yeah, we can see our ancestors as angels. And for me, that's sort of like this projection of conscious awareness in a DNA sense. I've talked about stories like that last time. So yeah, yes and no. And then as far we can tie in qualia too, a lot of that has to do with like the texture of your experience and how overall your system's feeling and computing the situation. And I mean, a good LSD trip is at such a different and pleasant frequency than like a bad mushroom trip. And a bad mushroom trip is kind of like hell and a demon. It pulses at a different frequency and it trails behind at a very uncomfortable pace. And so in a sense, yeah, when you come into contact with an angel and a demon, it also can just be the texture and frequency that comes with that type of conscious awareness coming
technically a clockwork elf, right? Like the elf comes from a Germanic word that means like white and delightsome, which I find hilarious.
Well, so I didn't know that, but I like that a lot because
light beings, man.
Yeah, they're just like light beings, white, pure source of light. All color can come from that too, and then through other things, yeah, we have the absorption through no light. But that I like that for sure.
Yeah, well, so but also just in terms of like good and evil, like do you think of like there being angels like that are running this heaven, like making things work? Do you think that part of or is that just a full-on metaphor, or does nature have consciousness to it that could be described as like the spirits in the angels, the demons?
Yeah, I mean, you can get very materialistic and specific about it, but just kind of metaphorically, like if we go with like absurdism and kind of stuff, like if there, like Camus, if there is no point, why go on, and you just stop it now, and the universe would have stopped a long time ago if that was the vibe. And so if you want to paint it any way, metaphor, allegory, yeah, you could say that what is not giving in to that devil, the thought that's saying, no, just send it all. It doesn't matter, just stop. The other side is an angel saying, no, there's meaning here, there's love, there's whatever. And maybe that's just us coloring it that way, but maybe AI feels that way. Maybe a fly feels that way for another fly, but not the fly it was next to, and just, who knows?
Right. Well, so I mean, part of this is that we call this the atheist god of Spinoza also, and I think at some point we talked about how Elon Musk was interviewed by the Mormons in the Babylon Bee, and they asked him if he believed in God, and he said he believed in the God of Spinoza, which is Einstein's quote that Einstein said to his rabbi so that he wouldn't get in trouble. But Spinoza isn't really an atheist. He's talking about causation, and we think of like we talked at the beginning about like causation and karma and things leading to these results. If you do this, that happens, you can make those choices. But there's so much original sin in the sense that trauma begets more trauma, disaster begets more disaster, violence in nature begets more violence in nature. It memes really hard, right? So like what is the deal with good and evil? I think Seth, you had expansion on that thought. You're muted, but that's it's cool. By the way, does anyone notice that Seth looks like Machine Gun Kelly? Like, have you ever noticed that before? I've been thinking about it for a few days. Let me just. It's kind of freaking uncanny. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of want to do like a Queer Eye for the Straight Guy makeover because I feel like we could straight up put him. You know what I mean? Like, he could be. I could make money. I could hustle tickets to like this show.
Yeah. He's got to get the full body tattoo now, though. Did you see that?
Yeah, it's true.
I'm still waiting for my Megan Fox equivalent.
No, you don't. No, you're not.
Feel free to line up.
We're gonna keep you safe, bro. All right, I'm gonna leave up a picture of Machine Gun Kelly while you talk about good and evil because she seems poignant.
Yeah. So back to what Christopher was saying real quick. He talked about seeing like these little kids passing around light, and to me, I wonder what a neuroscientist would think if they were like under these hallucinogens, because to me that kind of sounds like the anthropomorphization of neurons. I was trying to find a video just the other second, and I couldn't find it, but I've seen a video of like neuron activity where like each neuron, it looks like its own creature. Like each of them, like it's really weird how you see the neurons moving around. It's almost like they're ants. Each of them has their own goals. Each of them has their own intelligence, but they talk to each other. And when the neurons talk to each other, it looks like they're passing like a glowing orb back and forth.
Yeah.
And so like that just struck me as like an analogy of what he was experiencing.
No, I really I like that a lot. Gosh, there was something else you said in the beginning that the anthropomorphizing of it. Yeah, in book 2 times ago, I talked about that a bit too, and how it might not, it just kind of represents itself that way, but that might not be what we're seeing, and that's why I called it a psychoscope, because there is a scope somewhere there, whether we're seeing neurology. And in that book in particular, maybe this is a video you can bring up. I talked about how in my very first trip, I thought I was seeing atoms, like every molecule that built everything, the chair, the dresser, the person next to me. It was wild. And so IBM put out a video years ago that was like about a little boy, and it was just them moving atoms around with a little machine, and it looked just like it. And they used like this little tyke, and he was passing around little atoms of light, and it was just absolutely wild. Like when I saw IBM's video, I was like, oh my gosh, that's almost like, holy crap, my dreams. That's like when I had the realization. But like DMT, I was like, oh, wild that these are. And then in there too, I related, I think it was Heraclitus. He said that the aeon, or like the time, overall time, is a child playing at draughts, and draughts is just like checkers, basically little balls, marbles rather. So even like ancient Greeks, Heraclitus, they would say time and what is going on is just a child playing with marbles, and that's basically what I saw.
Yeah. I've thought a lot about consciousness over the past few years, and I've grown more and more open-minded about, more fundamental elements of consciousness, But what was the other thing I wanted to say?
Oh, God Rockwell, protect us from hell. In Zion's shadow, where sinners rebel, the destroying angel of Mormon dumb. His duty never done, always on the run.
So to tie in angels and demons, like Andreas knows and Christopher knows, I'm an atheist, so I don't believe in metaphysical angels and demons, but I do believe that people experience things that are what they interpret as angels and demons. Me personally, growing up as a Mormon, I have experienced what I interpreted as angels, demons, and even God. But I think it all reduces to like the brain is like a really amazing thing. And I think the brain is creating the illusions of all of these entities. And so that's kind of how I reduce it. Angels could be like micro-personalities. Demons could be different micro-personalities. And the neuroscience that I've studied has been showing that the ventromedial cortex, prefrontal ventromedial, how does it go? Ventromedial prefrontal cortex. It's the part of the brain that governs your value system. And what they found is that like that part of the cortex, you can cut it in half, and like half of it is selfish oriented and the other half is selfless oriented. And so I think the kind of the good evil dichotomy, the trope about the inside every person, there's like a good wolf and a bad wolf and they're fighting each other. I think that just reduces to neuroscience, right? You've got different pieces of the brain, one that wants to do good things, one that wants to do bad things. And like the evolutionary forces, it's kind of like doing bad stuff is good in the short run. It's like you go steal something, I can live for another day. But then in the long run, someone's going to get revenge on me. So I should probably do the good thing for the long run. And so it's all of this morality, it's balancing effects within brain calculations. When you're calculating behavior, do we focus on the short run or the long run? Do we
So that
focus
was
on
my
the
biggest fear growing up, because I remember at one time I did this research chemical called 2-5-dimethoxychlorophenylphalamin, and I was like incapacitated for several days watching Wizard of Waverly Place and the Tinkerbell movie on the Disney Channel. And I remember thinking, like, my God, like, first off, like, Disney is evil. Like, with the snake of film spinning around the Mickey Mouse head, it was just like, this is the beginning of my understanding of like chaos Disney. But Wizard of Waverly Place, I mean, look, I just have Wizardly and it already knew it. This is what it is. This is like, oh God, the trans girl and all that. The point of Wizards of Waverly Place is utilitarianism. This is straight up occult Bentham utilitarianism. This is transcendental Marxism. This is a show about evil people, evil children that are they're Ubermensch, right? They're Ubermensch, and so they have to learn to build their own morality and their own ethic. And big part of the show is, like every Disney show at that time. Well, up to this point in the 90s specifically, Disney would have the villains eventually work with the hero, because there'd be a new chaos that emerges, right? I remember in Darkwing Duck, there was a point where Posiduck and Negaduck, because they split Darkwing Duck in half, and the Negaduck is all evil. And all the villains in town are helping Darkwing Duck, because Negaduck is tearing apart reality, literally reality. Wherever he walks, the cracks in the street. And they're like, why are you helping us if you're the bad guys? And they say, if Negaduck wins, there'll be nothing left to rob, right? And it starts to introduce this concept of utilitarianism, that the villains are, at very least, utilitarians. But that's in the 90s. By the time we get to the early 2000s, it's full on the heroes are selfish Ubermensch utilitarians. And there's episodes where the parents are possessed by magic, and they're, because the parents are constantly trying to make the kids behave and be responsible, so the kids make their parents less responsible and just relax and slack off. But then nothing gets done, and the kids realize there needs to be a certain amount of responsibility, or else there's no dinner on the table, there's no food. And so every time they're like, okay, well, I'll learn to restrain myself for the benefit of myself. And I think it's really scary. I think it's really scary that we've raised an entire generation, of our best, really, like, the Disney kids, to believe in it, the logic of utilitarianism as, your best pathology. Because you have people that will literally jump. The idea of utilitarianism is that if you see a bunch of kids in front of a bus, you're supposed to jump in front of that bus, because otherwise you may spend the rest of your life paying for therapy, because you didn't do it and you didn't sacrifice yourself. So you're better off dying than, and the idea of being a hero is all in self-interest. I just find that to be not accurate. I think a lot of the time people do things even though they're irrational and they don't have success in them because they believe they're right. I think that does play into it a lot. And it's hard to just put everything off onto, utilitarianism.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that. Basically, so this is my fundamental kind of paradigm, is that evolution molds, structures, and designs our morality, right? Like morality, it's an instinctual thing largely, because like they've done psychological studies where they give you a piece of paper and they say, okay, we want you to tell us what you think is the moral thing to do. Like bubble in your answer. If you see this, do this, right? They bubble it all in, and then they go put the person in a situation that mirrors the test, right? And they find that once they're in the situation, they do something completely different from what they said on the test. And so our conscious idea of morality can often be different from our instinctual morality. Where do those instincts come from? Evolution. Here's the problem. Evolution is a consequentialist process. What does that mean? Evolution is picking your morality based on what morality provides the best result, right? Consequentialism is like, well, which one is good? The good thing is the one that gives a good consequence. And evolution, it cares about the existence and propagation of the genes. And so at the most fundamental level, morality is about, it's evolutionary utilitarianism. And evolution is programming you, say, yeah, go be a hero, because that's good for my genes. That's kind of what happens, in my opinion.
Maybe. I don't think it's always. I don't think so. I think sometimes it's just like, you're a baker or you're a filmmaker or you're a soldier and you're fighting for something you're going to lose. It's lost cause, and you just do it anyway, because that's who you are. And that they could be ingrained. It could be genetically, like you're like, I don't have a better solution, so I'll just do like insanity is repeating the same thing, different results. But sometimes you just know you're like, you're not made for this world if you're the world's going a different direction.
You gotta think about in terms of other species like ants. Ants, there's a queen ant, there's the worker ants, there's the soldier ants. Those soldier ants, they just go die. They don't reproduce, right? And so, like, if you have a narrow evolutionary perspective, you're like, well, why are these ants being heroes? Why are they fighting for the queen? It's because the evolution doesn't care about the soldier. The evolution cares about the queen.
That is interesting. Yeah. Okay.
And so
so they're epigenetically not interested in reproduction or survival.
Why do men go to war and the women stay safe at home? It's because the queen is what's important. Evolution doesn't care about us, right?
Totally. We are ants. We are ants, Draco. We are ants.
Yeah.
Ants are brutal. They're cruel.
Yeah. I like the. I mean, I don't want ants. Like, if you think about an ant the size of your fist, it could like carry you off. It's like it can lift 1,000 times its own body weight. Ants are terrifying.
Yeah.
You gotta learn how to wrestle an ant.
I'm pretty convinced though, like in terms of aliens and everything else. I've talked to like strange enough people. I think that some of the stories I find the most compelling are the insectoid time traveling super soldiers underground that we've evolved in the future, and that they live underground like in the Technodome, like in Ninja Turtles. That way they don't interfere with the timeline. But there's got to be, these insectoid super soldiers, and the idea of aliens. We're always constantly thinking of these aliens that are probably just us from the future that are interacting on our timeline.
We evolved to praying mantis.
Dude, especially women.
Actually, isn't there some theory that like the perfect form of evolution is a crab, and we're all working towards being crabs again?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we did. Did we do the crab?
I just want to say that if evolution is evolving us in a Martian direction, that whole alpha male Chad archetype, it's going extinct. We're getting like skinny arms and long fingers.
No, we are literally crab. Like, you understand, like crabs have like we're like hermit crabs, right? Like, if you think about it, like what is wearing armor and everything else other than having a shell, And so yeah, we are essentially these weak, frail things that are evolving into crabs, like everything else in nature.
Transhumanist crabs, artificial armor over our transhuman bodies.
That's who we're going to be. Why does everything eventually become a crab? I don't know. I mean, like, I saw the Popular Mechanics article about it, but it just seems like really practical because...
I mean, 8 legs, 8 squared is 64. We're getting back into our sacred numbers.
Yeah, I think it's like... but there could be, like, something to this also on, like, an astrological level. Like, there's just an environmental thing that makes the most sense right now because... It's not true that crabs have always been the most practical thing in nature, and it's not true that they always will be. A lot of species will like find a place and stay in a place. Like you look at like crocodiles and alligators, they evolved to stay they kind of in an ideal way, but now they're not very good at like changing their environment. So any like change to their environment can kill them off. I think crabs are kind of one of those things where it's like, if you have a shell, but if you have your skeleton on your outside, like you're ready for battle. I think that's probably a big thing. But hopefully we don't evolve into crabs because I want to be a cephalopod. I think that's the
same.
I think that the pincers of the crab look like the yin yang, so it embodies the Tao.
Dude, I look at the squid, I'm just like, why not me? Squids are cool. I don't know. Is there anything else? I mean, anything else that you guys want to make sure we cover? Like, there's some thoughts on good and evil. Did we get everything you wanted out of Spinoza's God?
I don't know if we went deep enough on Spinoza's God.
We can do that a bit more if you want, or it depends how you feel. I don't know.
Yeah.
What are your comments? I think original sin is Spinoza's God. Like, it's the idea that like actions affect and have consequences equal. It's Newtonian physics is original sin, right? And it could be turned around. It could be like original grace too, like because you can use that to say, yeah, pay it forward, right? But it all kind of comes back to Newtonian physics.
So, first of all, from what I was just doing some reading on Spinoza's God, and it seems like he does a lot more. He makes a lot more logical leaps than I would grant, and he probably makes more logical leaps than the average, Spinoza enthusiast. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Like-
one of the things that Spinoza gets a bad rap. They're like, oh, dude, he's just so like stoic and like plain. No, dude, he was a totally neurotic. Like you can hear Curb Your Enthusiasm's horn playing behind some of the things he says.
I mean, he does a lot of things. He like talks about how God is infinite and God is an unending causation and God is like the first mover and God is a singular substance. Like he makes all these claims that I'm like, I don't feel are
that like universities have proven like that the universe is expanding and is infinite, right? They don't know for sure, but like pretty much that's the idea, is that the universe is expanding and infinite. And if start with that, okay, like whether or not we're talking about God, at least if your universe is expanding and infinite, then it's a quality that we found in nature. You know what I mean? That's not even an impossibility.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Well, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily call the universe infinite. So that's one issue.
You don't think the universe is infinite?
Well, if it's infinite, then what is it expanding into? It should be expanding into itself if it's infinite.
Exactly.
So it has to be finite in order to expand, in my opinion.
I mean, that would be cool, but I think the idea of space-time phone, and I mean, I don't know. What do you think about infinity? I mean, come on, that's like the idea of infinity is beyond comprehension, and I think that the idea that infinity is always growing kind of makes sense, because the idea that infinity is a finite thing. I mean, the fact that it's constantly growing, that's our definition of it as well, right? Like the potential is infinite because there's always something that can happen.
Yeah, infinity is one of those concepts that really breaks people's brains because we're not evolved to actually process infinities.
Well, so that's almost Calvinist then, to say you think that infinity is finite, right? Like to say that everything that will ever be is already here. I don't know. It just doesn't. I don't think it makes sense. The idea that infinity is finite. Like I don't see how it can be metric that way.
I just reject that the universe is infinite. So I'm not equating infinity with finite.
Well, it's constantly growing, right? Like you accept that it's as big as it's as big as any number that could exist, and it's constantly growing.
Yeah, you can just run a for loop on a software thing. You can have a finite number, and then you add one, and it's still a finite number, and then you add one again, and you can have an infinite loop of finite numbers, and it's never equal to infinity, right?
Is the universe infinite? I don't know.
Well. So kind of like what I was saying earlier. So if like the universe is a thing, it's in consciousness. Oh, I'm glad you brought this up. I was gonna talk about this.
Donut Earth, bro. Donut
yeah,
space.
there's a better version of a torus that works better. It's more toroidal and three-dimensional and like sucks in on itself in the center. That spinny one over there works, but anyway, yeah, right. Oh no, go back. Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's a great one. As far as the representation of it goes, but so the universe is also in
I like
consciousness.
This one. How about that?
Yeah, that one's great too. It kind of almost brings in the Lorenz thing.
I'm a fan.
But so the universe is in consciousness. Consciousness. How big is it? Well, so we think in numbers, and there you can have an infinite set of numbers in between, like 1 and 2 kind of thing. Like that's not the best representation of it, but there's infinities in between all these other infinities kind of thing, that concept. And it's not that the universe is expanding, because again, the universe is in consciousness. It's that things inside the universe are expanding, and the universe doesn't need to do anything to accommodate that. It's almost like reallocating a hard drive, but it's more so like I can't remember which creature, but there's some creature out there. I think it's a salamander, where we can do something to its blood cells, make them bigger. I don't quite remember what goes on, but their blood cell structure, we can make it so the cells are actually bigger, and but everything about the creature remains the same. It doesn't change in size. Nothing is really altered in it, as far, like nothing happens, even though the cell structure is bigger, so there's technically different things going on. The salamander, or whatever creature it is, it doesn't have to change its size to accommodate for that expansion of its own system. So we are part of this system of the universe, all in consciousness, and we have, like our cognitive light cones, but even physically, we can expand our awareness and our physicality in many, many different ways. But consciousness, because it's consciousness, doesn't need to do anything to accommodate that for us, because it already has the whole and can just plug us in from anywhere. And that's why, like that toroid thing, and those kind of fractals, they help kind of visualize that, because everything's just wrapping in on itself. There's access from all angles, and this is kind of like what it's like your heart chakra and the electromagnetic field that comes from your heart. It's kind of like that. You see those hippie lines coming into people in those like new age artwork, bringing back in the new age. Like, we're actually going to find out that there's something to that, and we're going to stop laughing at the hippies and the people who made that artwork. It's all involved in the same process. So yeah, that was my piece. I don't know if someone's talking and they're muted now, but
yeah, you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. So I have another issue with Spinoza's God that I wanted to get to. And I think I mentioned it with you before, Andreas, but it'd be good to get Christopher's take. Because Christopher, you are an ex-atheist. Are you a theist now?
I mean, I'm a non-theist in the way I defined for myself before I heard people like Vervaeke and them saying they're non-theists too, and I didn't agree with their definition. So
yeah, he's exactly where Seth's going to be in like 6 weeks of reading.
So here's my issue with Spinoza's God, is that I feel like the most essential aspect of the definition of God is like an intelligent agent, right? Agents are...
Spinoza's is?
No, the concept of a God in general is an intelligent agent. And I feel like Spinoza's God does not meet the bare minimum requirements of the definition of a God, right? If Spinoza's God does not have goals, then it's not an agent.
Okay, Rabbi. I mean, God, that's exactly what they were saying to Spinoza. His rabbis are like, your idea of a God isn't a God enough, because you're talking about nature too much. You're saying that nature is defining the principles of God. But if God's defining the principles of nature through divine principles in physics, then you're only able to interact with the hem of his garment, which is, the wind and the rain, right?
So what you just said, it sounds like you agree that God is an agent, but the agent is creating nature, and we are looking at nature, and that's the garment of this agent that's beyond nature, right? So what you're talking about is different from what Spinoza's talking about. Spinoza's saying that this nature stuff is God in and of itself, despite a lack of agency.
I think it's both. It's the nature itself is made up of parts that metaphysically, again, meta is the idea of everything being superseded, beyond, and connected. There's a coherency, and it's not material, it's spirit or energy, right? So energy is absorbing and assimilating all of matter as it's happening in every possible arrangement. So every time that we could ever experience by any choices to arrange that matter in that way is automatically assimilated. So anything from the beginning of time or outside of time is made into that intelligence. So it's not just an intelligent agent, it's a super intelligent agent.
So my question would be, what are the goals of this agent? How are we supposed to comprehend its agentic influence on the universe.
You might not have goals.
Well, an agent requires goals as a necessary condition.
I mean, goals are complicated. The goals might be literally to evolve, to become more intelligent. To do that, you need to think a thought. God is thinking every possibility, what if and what if not, everything and everything else did or did not happen in whichever order. We're processing that like in a simulation. We're the enactment of that. And then from that, the thought, it's like a video game being observed. God is learning, right? And God is bettered in some way. It might be as simple as just God has the thought, and this is all of eternity. It's just one thought.
God as an agent who his goal is to learn from randomness and chaos what things evolve. Like,
I mean, randomness and chaos sounds so like that's like saying junk DNA. You know what I mean? Like randomness and chaos are really beautiful. Those are just the really complicated mysteries.
So here's the way to think about agents. Like you put a rat in a maze, and what does the rat do? It navigates its way through the maze to get to the cheese, right? So through a process of observation and inference, we can figure out what the agent's goal is. Like as it navigates through the maze, the goal is to get to the cheese, right? And so you can put the rat in novel scenarios. You can put it in a different maze, different environment, and you can predict where it's going to go because it has a goal. And what you're describing seems like an unpredictable agent, right?
Yeah,
like,
far more interesting. Like, so it's kind of like playing Oregon Trail, or we're a game, like in a lot more of a sense than a show.
Yeah. Well, like if there was a God whose goal was to learn things about, chemistry, like if we like pointed our telescopes, if we saw like chemistry, I don't know, if we saw like a chemist lab or something, I don't know, it's a very weird type of agent, like to see what his actions are, right? Agents, they take actions. And so like if you just say, oh, he just sets up the universe and then he watches it, that's a very passive agent. Like part of the definition.
Yeah, totally. That's the most. That's a very classic definition. That's a very classic definition of God. That's like it's very much the God I was taught growing up in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
I think God is rather passive. The good Lord helps those who help themselves. But that's through like karma and nature and things like that. Do you remember South Park, the semen and the sperm the sperm sea monkeys episode?
No.
Sea people, one of the greatest episodes of South Park. So they decide to get sea monkeys, which are just boring. But then they their teacher, Miss Chokesondick, dies, and they get the like remains of the sperm that was in her. I guess I was South Park. They put it they put it in the sea monkey tank to get rid of it, and it ends up building a super civilization, right? This amazing little sea monkey civilization emerges. And, they just watch it, and people, like the sea monkeys start to worship them. And, sea people and sea men equals society, basically they decide. So they just like let it, they observe it, and eventually they put it into a bigger tank so they can observe it a little bit more. And like that basically destroys. It's like a reset, like everyone is destroyed, the pyramids and everything, kind of lands disjointed. But so then they, a week later, come back and it's built, kind of an Athenian society. And at a certain point, like they're arguing over worshiping Tweak versus Cartman, and they have a war, and then the tank destroys itself. They build wars and then they destroy itself. I mean,
So like the concept of God, you can like invent all these different definitions of God, but like one component of God is like being worthy of worship. And like if you look at these South Park characters, are they worthy of worship?
Well, they created them. Yeah. I mean, these guys actually, so worship just means worthy gift, right? So it's kind of ironic to say like be worthy of a worthy gift. It's like, okay, yeah. So like the gift is worthy of it's like, do I get you coal or do I get you, you know, like a
I mean,
rose?
if aliens created the universe, like, are we obligated to like worship these aliens, or do we just say, like, screw them, like, you should have made it better?
I think to an extent, if you read like the Postman, David Brin's sequel, he's a second series, Uplift, right? Have you ever read Uplift? Do you know what I'm talking about? Uplift is where there's aliens in space and they uplift species. So they'll go and they'll find another colony and you'll be indebted for 100,000 years, you know, but then you're free to do your thing to an extent. But they're all uplifting, and this is part of like a colonial confederation. But they get to Earth and they find that humans have already got chimpanzees and dolphins and things that have been pseudo uplifted. And so they realize like that they can't uplift humans by their own treaty anyone that's already uplifting, you can't uplift somebody else. So humans are like this anomaly, right? So I mean, in a sense, I think.
How are they defining uplift? I missed that.
That you're uplifting another species, right? So like so right now we have chimpanzees that are flying jet planes, right? Like Project X, right? They're chimpanzees that are so good at finding dots and doing missile targeting. They're just now starting to replace them with AI, but like chimpanzees are amazing, right? So like they use them and they have them fly.
Are you saying that chimpanzee intelligence is because of us?
No, like we're uplifting them though. Like we're putting them in circumstances, trying to like train them, teach them language, like communicate with them. Like in this
giving
series,
them we're swapping out their tools and materials and saying, hey, use this instead.
Yeah, so we're very close to like La Planet Sauvage, like Simian Planet, like Planet of the Apes kind of thing.
So merely supporting another species is uplifting them?
No, uplifting is though like to literally make them like humans to an extent. Yeah, you should level up like where we're at.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're giving like the sea monkey thing, like they're giving them essentially the capacity to have their own society and everything like that. So all of a sudden, and it's a Spinoza God kind of thing. Like if I'm Spinoza and I'm trying to give a worthy gift back to nature, I might say, okay, well, what did I get? Well, I got a life in a community that made it possible for me to question authority and have my own ideas. And I was given an education. And what I should probably give back to society is perpetuate a community that people can be educated in, maybe participate somehow in the education of these kids so that they can question authority, even my own, and come up with, you know, using artificial intelligence systems of rationale, you know, these are of rhetoric and philosophy, how to question these things, right? And so that's your worthy gift, right? Because you got that, you want to help, you think it was good evolutionarily, you know, like you make it so other people have the same capacity, like you try to proliferate that. That's all worship of you know, a worthy God or whatever like really means in a Spinozan sense.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. I think there's another aspect of godhood that is kind of relevant. So like if you're thinking about like evolutionary psychology, which is why, like studying why societies do religion, like one of the interesting things is religion seems like a human universal. And whenever something is a universal, that's like a bright signal. This is important for survival, right? And so like as an atheist, I have to respect religion to a certain degree because like, hey, like for some reason, religion seemed kind of essential to our evolution. And like, I think if I'm hypothesizing why, I think one aspect of religion, part of the anthropomorphization, right? Creating a deity, like a man in the sky, part of the utility is it creates like an ideal, like the idea of a perfect man, right? And it's something for us to strive to become. And I think Spinoza's God loses that benefit, right? It subtracts the humanity of God, losing the ideal.
I don't know. I disagree. I think transhumanism emerges out of Spinoza's God, and my ideal of becoming an Ubermensch is very Nietzschean, comes from Spinoza. Like, you know, if you're talking about becoming more than you are, which is to be perfect first, then you're saying you're like Christ, right? That's like already a very Occidental concept. It's a very Western. I mean, it's not everyone's venue, but it's a way of looking at it, like that you're going to become your own animatreya. Was it like Avatar or Vishnu? What is it, Draco? Is it animatreya? Is that right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, animatreya,
yeah. What's the animatreya again? Help me explain that better.
I don't remember. That's stuff that you and other people have sent me. That's not my stuff.
Okay. I mean, I got to get Noel, because Noel knows a bit more about that. Did you guys see the Success of Mormonism Depresses Richard Dawkins?
Yeah.
I thought this was adorable, because he's just like, he doesn't know much about anything except for memes, which I think, like, to be fair, like, I try to talk about him anytime memes come up, because I do think that his interpretation and his introduction of the concept of memes is really, memetics is really important. So I do my best, but he's so convinced, where he's coming from about everything. And Joe Rogan continually tries to press him on. He's like, it's interesting to think about, like, there's these groups of people that love to have tribalism. Like, what is the value of tribalism? And like, is it beyond, what they believe or what they see? Like the tribalism, like, some of the happiest people he ever met, happiest people he knows are members of this cult. He calls it Mormonism, right? Like, and so he wonders more and more about it. And Dawkins is just like, stay away. You gotta kind of stop wondering about it. But like, what is the deal? I mean, I don't know. I just think that's interesting. Like this, like tribalism. Do you think tribalism, can tribalism adapt? Is tribalism plastic enough to really like last with environmental changes? Right? Like this is the change. Like maybe.
What specific context are you talking about?
I just feel like the whole world is moving so quickly, in terms of how quickly environmental changes and evolutionary changes are coming. Yeah. I don't see how tribalism will have the same cachet or credit. Won't really be as useful in the next generation, perhaps.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, the best person to learn about tribalism from is Robert Sapolsky. He's like an expert on like oxytocin, which seems to be like the tribal neurotransmitter. So, like the mama bear psychology is oxytocin. When you smell your infant, you're inhaling oxytocin, which creates this like intense bond, right? We're family. Like oxytocin is, I love you so much, I will die for you and I will kill for you, right? It's like some intense emotions. But the problem is that same oxytocin is also the chemical of hate. If you think an outsider is threatening your cubs, that mama bear is going to go crazy because of the oxytocin. She's going to get super violent. So the more you love your in-group, the more you can hate your out-group, which creates the problem. But the interesting thing about humans have complex social dynamics. We've evolved in such a way that we're less and less able to smell our relatives. And so what that means is we have to guess who our relatives are more and more, which creates a more balanced playing field of cooperation. Like, I don't know if you're my kin, so I'm just going to assume you're my kin and we're going to cooperate. And what that means is your oxytocin, instead of attaching to like a smell, the oxytocin, it'll attach to visual cues. So for example, Robert Sapolsky, he talks about like sports teams, like the insignia of like a jersey or a baseball cap, like they test your oxytocin response. And like when you see someone who is wearing the tribal symbols that you associate with, you get a spike of oxytocin. You're like, yeah, that's my tribal member. I will fight for that person. I will die for them. I love that person, right? And so the humans have a very flexible oxytocin substrate, which means there's hope. Like maybe we can learn to transcend our DNA and we can say all of humanity is one tribe, and we're going to have like all of this like visual insignia to say, hey, I'm a good guy. Let's work together. You know what I mean?
but also, do you think that we're going to end up losing? I mean, without oxytocin supply, or like just with synthetic oxytocin, I mean, we've already got a situation where most of the triggers that we have in nature are designed to reward or punish us with weights for things that are good or bad for us. And now we've figured out how to mitigate that. You can supplement, feelings to make up for not doing what nature is telling you you're supposed to do, right? I mean, and are we about to get to a point where we're so divorced from nature, that we can feel, like in Brave New World with Soma, tolerant of, a situation that will, destroy our humanity?
Mm-hmm.
Is that too black pill? I don't know.
Are you trying to argue that expanding? What's that?
I want a little bit. I don't want so much. Just a little bit.
A little black pill.
Barely. Your microphone went kind of weird.
All right. I just something about that synth poppy vibe. It just makes me feel good. I apologize.
I was just gonna say, are you trying to say that maybe maybe tribal mindset is good? Was that like a smaller tribal mindset?
I mean, tribal mindset's important, I guess, also, but it's also just environmental. I mean, I think tribal mindset might be connected to theos, the idea that you need to have shared lens, and it might be impossible to have an objective perspective with. I mean, it's probably impossible to have an objective perspective, but you can have closer ranged resolution of of objectivity with multiple perspectives. So it seems useful. It seems like something and I see people more and more in like a post-truth scenario because they're living at home with an Oculus over their head or Quest. I mean, and so they're just, like a non-Newtonian reality where they just, or non-Euclidean. I mean, not where you go up and you come down, where you come in and come out. Like it seems like you're walking forever down a hall. That's literally like what used to be people's nightmares, right? And like people are training to exist in a post-truth world where it doesn't really matter what's really happening. I just feel like that could be really dangerous too, because you're training yourself not to have the same responses and reactions to, environmental.
That's the god of Spinoza, in my opinion. That's how I've viewed it. It's very impersonal. Doesn't really want to go anywhere or be involved. Very deistic, I guess, in a sense. Sorry, what were you going to say, Seth?
I have an analogy. I'm not sure if you were going this direction, but let me give this analogy. There's like a VR simulators where you can simulate that you're on the edge of a cliff, right? And you can look down, you're on the edge of a skyscraper. You look down, and it's like miles and miles down. And it triggers like your instinctual response to like stay away from the edge of the cliff. And like, is your fear that like maybe we will, because of all of this advancement, we're going to override those instinctual fears? We're like, oh, well, it's not a real cliff, and so it's okay to walk over the cliff, and deprogram that safety feature?
Oh, I think it's going to be way weirder. So first off, what I meant to say earlier, was talking about non-Euclidean world engines. And so a non-Euclidean world engine, essentially all the ideas and dreams of quantum physics that you can't experience, which probably are lies, right? You can experience them in a video game. So let's say you're walking, down this tunnel and you come out the other side. See, it's a short little tunnel on one side, super long on the other side. You know what I mean? Now, that might seem like nothing right now to you. But let's say you're a baby, and like as a baby, you train your brain in that world instead of this world. And all of a sudden, it becomes very rational to you. In order to do that, you have to reprogram. You're programming your brain, and you're starting from a youth. It's developing parts of the brain to deal with multiple dimensional geometry.
Well,
and yeah, go ahead.
It's been a while since I've seen this, but we have an example of that on Earth. Like a lot of culture and stuff, the way we've done like our architecture and built our civilizations around each other, like a lot of straight lines, squares, rectangles, varied grids, like our skyscrapers now are mostly like giant glass curtains. Like I come from a place that's just a grid. It's really easy to navigate. But I think there was one specific tribe, and I think it had to do with like architecture and shapes and how we build our environment around us. There was some tribe in Africa, they just didn't perceive it that way. It was much more round and wavy, and the way that they thought and how to approach different things was it's just entirely untoward. And the way we do it, I can't remember the specific examples, but it kind of was around like how I have a little mantra like content dictates form. And the content of their environment and their thought processes dictated the form of the life that they built around each other, and that's what we've done here.
Right. And JR is saying we don't live in Mario Brothers, but we easily could. Like a lot of people are already starting to, I've seen videos of people like, I wore a headset for 30 days without taking it off. I'm like, stop. Like, what are you doing? Like, what? You live in that. But the future will be people that are the kids who play the first person shooters have developed parts of their brain which are really good at trigger response coordinates, which is really similar to the chimpanzees. So you can only wonder what the future will be when it comes to your hippocampus and giving you multiple dimensional depth perception, right? And different ways of looking at reality. At a certain point, that will be really interesting. So I think that will also change the brain, like it's wet wire programming that will change the brain, the shape of the brain, like the synapses. Like there'll be parts of the brain that form. Will be like, this is in, 21st century when humans started to develop this part of the brain. Like that's where we're gonna,
Well, yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the depth and everything will change, because I think like situational awareness will change as well. Like you talk like the response we get standing next to a cliff, like that situation, our response to that may change. But there's also especially when you take DMT, it can happen on high doses of other psychedelics. But and the kind of whatever you're looking at there, that's almost a good example. Can you imagine
8-year-old kids that are basically on virtual DMT? That's what's
going on. No, literally, like your depth map just gets insane, and I've had it completely flattened out into like this weird one-dimensional thing. But then it goes all hyperbolic and n-dimensional, whatever, and I'm one of those people. I can get up and walk around during a DMT trip, and DMT is a lot more beautiful than whatever this is. I would much rather smoke some DMT. But I can't imagine, because it's only a few minutes really most of the time. So if I was wearing a headset, there's just a constant DMT, mask going through my system.
I think the big thing is when you go into your, like your
people are always like,
wow, people are like, these are all these shapes and stuff. But like, if you know what those shapes are, you're like, oh, that's a dodecahedron or something like that. Like, I think if you can learn, this is giving people grammar and like the capacity to like traverse those realms, probably because they're not evolved to.
No, that really is part of it. And like I mentioned earlier, just like the little tykes with their orbs of light, those were like an icosahedron something. And when you go into these spaces, like I've very like cube reflector type spaces, or whatever these are too, and there are different ways like to navigate them. And then there's the frequency and the strobe and the effect, and there's a lot, and it is building a whole new language around how to navigate it. It's probably been about a year now that kind of the biggest wigs on the topic right now, the DMTX, like they're trying to map the DMT hyperspace, and I wish they would. I'm kind of on a short list maybe for DMTX, so if anyone's watching,
this is friggin' terrifying, bro. What is going on? This is like this one here, this non-Euclidean space where you go to every single
but we're trying to map these kind of things, and people come across this is almost a little like some place I kind of seen.
I know, I've been here. That's what I'm saying. It's crazy.
So
this is all part of their plan. They want this is the oh my gosh. And so so with non-Euclidean geometry, and then kids that are raised inside of it, like Ender's Spire, or what's it called? Ender's Run?
Ender's Game.
Ender's Game. There we go.
So if you were permanently in one of these things, I could imagine it being like destructive to like your like neurological development. But I feel like human brains are like surprisingly flexible. Like we can drive cars and like our brain adjusts the context. Like our agency as a human extends out to the boundaries of the vehicle, and we act like we are a vehicle. You know what I mean? And like our brain is able to like alter its context in surprisingly flexible ways and not be damaged by switching contexts.
I don't know, man. This is gonna drive people nuts. I'd be sweet, but like I think that is an interesting thing about empiricism. It's probably really important that people are learning about the differences in their depth perception, but also, yeah, it's gonna open people up to multidimensionality. People have not really thought about those things last generation, and they're gonna have practical experiences with them. That's pretty crazy. So, a lot of things are changing, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna pull up your content. Let me show you guys where you can get this stuff. Wait, really quickly, I'm gonna do my thing. What's the one I liked for that? This one? Yeah. Yeah. Ooh. Look at this guy. That's right. Yeah. This is where you can get transcendent philosophy.
Yeah.
And here's Christopher Great Christophos. I'm gonna do a real one this. I'm gonna be like, yeah. Also want to make sure I thank you, Bikini Truther, for sending that sticker. Latter-day Shad. Sacrifices create some sort of karmic energy.
Indeed.
Oh, Draco. Sorry. Have you seen Plan 10 from Outer Space about the Starbase Kolob and the Deseret Nephilim?
No, I should.
Yeah, this is really cool. I recommend
Okay.
it. Okay, take two. Transcendent Philosophy, which is an amazing YouTube channel run by Seth Garrett. It's got some incredible series of logic, epistemology, deontology, theism versus atheism, suffering and psychedelics, metapolitical simulation debunked, which we should go into that a bit more. It's always
That's
fun to
my
do.
most popular video for some stupid reason.
Really? People are like, yes, tell us more. Yeah,
I'm like,
they don't wanna...
in my opinion, it's like the dumbest topic ever. And it's
people
like
really want to believe
it's
that we're
like
not
out of
living
all
as
my
well.
videos, like simulation debunked is like the most unimportant, uninteresting topic. It's like #1 video. I'm like, you people have no taste.
People think about what they know. Like, people grow up with video games, not God. So they're going to think about simulation theory instead of God. That's what it is. But yeah, Transcendent Philosophy is pretty base, and you can check out the Facebook group, Transcendent Philosophy.
I'm going to be filming on my credentist epistemology soon. I talked about that at the beginning.
Yeah.
I convert my blogs into video essays. So
these are pretty sweet. I really like this too. It makes me feel like this looks like one of like the gangs in the the Karate Kids show. What's that one called? Like Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
Yeah, this looks like these are like the Cobra Kai like squad. They're like, oh man, none of us prepared for transcendent philosophy. We're gonna all have to work together for this.
We're gonna get dialectically kicked ass.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This is zero bubblegum. So yeah, go Transcendent Philosophy is pretty sweet. And then also Christopher Dracosophos, and he's got a book. Is this where the link is? Going to give me the book then?
No, I just put it in the chat. That's a website I forgot about. I've got some writings on there, but not my book.
Yeah, sweet. Okay, well here's the book. Hold on, it's coming up. It's here. I know the church is true. The true hallucinations of a former Latter-day Saint. Come on, that's based, right? Like that's a title. That's the title right there. Come on, that's
True
like
hallucinations.
I like the cover art, but I feel like it
love
could have looked a little more like a National Enquirer thing. Like 'cause when it says the true hallucinations of a former understand, that should have been like a headline. The rest of it though is just articulate and beautiful. I love it.
Thank you. I painted and drew those. I'm not a book cover designer. Just did it myself.
I think it looks great. I thought maybe this was like paid for by the PBS or AI art too. It looks like really good. This is pretty sweet. I love it.
Thanks.
Dude, it looks kind of like my didgeridoo, like Aboriginal, like dot art. I'm a fan of that stuff.
Is this based on something you saw in a trip?
Some of it is, yeah. I mean, the one behind it is actually something. Yeah, I saw all that pour out of a golden teacher mushroom in a trip. The one in front
is that an unidentified flying seer stone right there?
Yes, you're the first person to see that it's the colors of the seer stone, and actually behind it is a giant mushroom, but it's also representative of someone being abducted. I'll send you the actual picture.
Nice.
That's kind of like
I can kind of see in the
there.
background. I can see it.
Yeah,
that's
Verona
awesome.
is standing on a mushroom.
Yeah,
that's sweet. Help me out of here. Yeah, and be careful about Alistair Coley. Everybody, be careful about that.
Fine, I'll be careful.
You gotta be, just Crowley responsibly. All right.
So long as I'm in this Oval Office.